Hello and welcome to the Shea Hits Everything podcast, where two brothers argue about video games and other shit that matters. My name is Shea, and today I hate that my family just rotates through being sick, so one of us is always sick, and guess what? This time it's me.
And my name is Kyle, and today I hate running a work meeting where nobody will talk.
Also very painful in a more psychological, mental, emotional way.
Well, I was going to say in a more mundane day-to-day way than yours is.
Right. Yeah, before we relaunched the podcast, just for funsies, I listened to all of our old episodes, and it was like every 3 to 4 episodes, one of us was sick. And that's just the way life works, and it's super annoying. And,
yeah,
testing playback, listening to my voice right now, how nasally and awful I sound, but we adapt and overcome, and so I apologize in advance for any cough sounds, hacking, sneezing, wheezing, dying sounds you may listen to as we're going through. But hey, at least I got like a nice low growl. That's the benefit of being sick.
You have a low growl. I wouldn't
not nice.
Categorize it
not
as
nice. Great. Thanks. Appreciate you backing me up.
I got you.
No. So it's funny because we moved to doing this podcast monthly, and one of the primary reasons, not the only reason, but one of the primary reasons that we moved to monthly instead of every other week is I've got 2 kids. Like, we both work. As we get older, our gaming time gets less and less, for me at least, maybe not for you because you don't leave your house ever. But I was always afraid that, like, I'm not going to have anything to talk about if we do it every other week, because it takes me like 3 months to play through a single game, and that's not fun to listen to, just to talk about the same things all the time. So we went to monthly, and I have like 30 games to talk about that I played this past month. So.
That's awesome, man.
No, it is nice, and we'll hear this as we wrap up the episode, but it is nice to be in a place where I am excited to play new games and try new things and just booting something up. Just play it for an hour. You never know what might happen. So point being, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. On the agenda, let me see if I can do this in a single breath. Here are the games and video game adjacent, nerd adjacent, a couple quick TV shows that we're going to talk about. Today we have Hi-Fi Rush, High on Life, Forspoken, Dead Space, Satisfactory, Scorn, Far Cry 6, Metro Exodus, Outpath First Journey, The Long Dark Wintermute, Tunic, The Quarry, Dome Keeper, Rogue Tower, Icarus, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, House of the Dragon, Andor, and HBO's The Last of Us. I didn't even almost make it in a single breath, but in my defense, being congested, it feels like my lungs are vaguely on fire at all times.
There's basically a breath before every single one of those, yeah.
So I'm also,
it's like a micro breath.
I'm in performance mode as well, and part of being in performance mode is having some nice deep breaths and going down to your core, that's where you get all the emotion from.
That's my. You're not in fidelity mode, the 4K 30, you're in 1080p 60.
Yes, exactly. High frame rate, low poly.
That's where I operate, baby.
Actually, I'm on like the YouTube low quality bit rate. I'm on like a 720p. Someday I'll get back to the 1080 60 frames, but not today is not that day. So tons of video games to talk about. We will also be talking news, a couple quick hitters on the news, some of the big stories. We're going to talk about all the shenanigans happening with Ubisoft. We're going to talk about, the negative side of the industry with a bunch of layoffs that are happening, specifically in video games, as well as the larger tech scene that impacts video games and impacts games media in particular. We're going to be talking as a recap of Microsoft's developer showcase that happened, some Sony leaks and rumors that are coming out, and then we're also going to talk about the day before, which is definitely a vaporware game. I know you brought this up in the last episode of like a 2023 game to look forward to, and I was kind of like, and it turns out it's probably the right reaction to the day before, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We're also going to take a brief look back since it's been 3 years since we did the podcast regularly. Some of the big games from 2019, 2020, 2021, because we never got to talk about them.
Right.
So we're going to talk about them just a little bit. Though they may come up here and there in future episodes, but we're going to look back at that. And then we're also going to look forward on the games coming out in February. What are the things that we're excited about? Maybe games that we're both going to play. And then we have an email, our very first email
already
back from the podcast. And what's especially exciting, it comes from our good friend Adam, who I believe, I should have fact checked this, I believe was our very first email writer back in like our front 5 episodes.
You can't just invoke that without having fact checked it.
That's a good point. I am 99% sure.
Adam, write us an email. Let us know if you were the first.
Adam, you can be our second email back.
And send another email.
So as I said,
all right, listeners, you'll all find out in a month.
Right. Yeah. We'll have to add a corrections segment from when someone else writes in like, hey, I was the first person. But it was more just, it made me excited because I was like, oh, okay, we're still showing up in people's subscription boxes.
Yeah, like for some reason, like someone never hit that unsubscribe button for some reason. Like
hey,
either
cool
it was through like gross negligence, or I like to think there was a little spark of hope, a little kindling of joy hidden deep within a black cold heart, just waiting to be roared to life once again.
So I before we were ramping back up, I went back to the old info@SheaHatesEverything.com email address, which is where you can send your emails. I went back to double check that email and do some tests and make sure it was still forwarding like I wanted it to. And a couple months after we stopped the podcast, our good friend Steve had emailed us just like essentially begging us to release a new podcast, and it broke my heart. So Steve, if you're out there still listening,
we gotta read that in the email segment, and then we'll talk about we do email at the end.
Yeah,
we'll talk about this one that Adam, potentially first time writer, sent in, and I really want you to read Steve's email. Steve!
Yeah. Steve, for our new listeners, stalwart email writer. Whenever we needed to have something to talk about through email, Steve always came through in the clutch. So Steve, if you're out there, I'm so sorry that I missed. I at least would have replied to you and given you a better explanation. I know not everybody follows on Twitter, which is where I kind of had posted a big thing about why we weren't doing the podcast anymore. But anyway, the past is the past. We're moving forward. Steve, please send us another email. Adam, please confirm that you were the first person.
I want to know if Steve's still okay.
Steve from DC. Oh, man. Yeah. Brings me back. All right. So what do you say we talk about some video games?
Nah.
The first video game that we should talk about, that I'm going to force us to talk about, is Hi-Fi Rush.
Okay.
So I meant to say this at the jump before we dived in. Before we divined into the content. Last episode, one of the things that we wanted to do was pick a game that we both were going to play during that month so that we would have a relevant thing to talk about, so that it wasn't always, I played this game, you played this game, I played this game, you played this game, right?
Yeah.
And the game that we agreed to play, both of us, was Scorn.
Yeah.
You had already played some Scorn.
About 2/3 of it, yeah.
We both committed to playing Scorn, where you said you were going to jump back into it. I was going to give it a try. I obviously didn't commit to finishing it, just in case I didn't like it. You did not play any more Scorn.
I found where I stopped, and I watched a no commentary gameplay of the rest of it.
Oh, cool. So, that's not the point at all.
But hang on, but. I can still speak to my experience having played the first 2/3 of it, and the way in which it controlled and the mechanics and interacting with the puzzles. I can still speak to all that stuff, and I can project that knowledge forward to the latter third of the game.
Yes, I understand all of this. The point is the principle of the point. That in the first fucking episode of the podcast being back, we committed to finding a game that we were both going to play, and you failed at this in the first fucking episode. Secondarily, I'm going full airing of grievances. Secondarily,
Okay.
I have not called you on this prior to right now because I wanted to save it for the podcast.
Okay.
The biggest game that Shadow dropped that everyone everywhere has been talking about, Hi-Fi Rush, and you didn't even load it up?
No, I don't fucking care about it.
See, but here's the thing is we're doing a podcast about video games, and at a certain point, like, there's a little bit of relevance that should be had when we're talking about video games, because, like, does anyone want to listen to a podcast where we're exclusively talking about games that came out 3 years ago?
Listeners, what is happening right now? What is, like, if
I'm calling you out.
He has a machine gun, and he's just unloading it at my face right now. What is going on right now?
Because this podcast is not a business. We don't make money on this podcast.
No.
You are not my employee. However...
No, I'm your brother.
If you were my employee, you would be fired.
Okay.
You didn't do the one task set out for us to play a game together, and you ignored the most exciting game release of the month.
What are you talking about? Dead Space Remake came out. The most exciting game.
Hi-Fi Rush.
No, absolutely not.
Hey,
no.
Hey,
this is
listeners.
A stupid conversation.
Hey, listeners, nod your head if you know what Dead Space is.
Email us if you know what Dead
without
Space
playing
is.
the Dead Space remake. Do you know what Dead Space is?
Yes, it was one of the most popular sci-fi game franchises of all time.
Absolutely. Hey, listener, before they announced and shadow dropped Hi-Fi Rush, did you have any idea what that is?
No. So
why would
people give a fuck?
Because that's why people are listening, to hear about games and talk about games.
Yeah. The ones that interest us. I don't want to, like, I'm not going to spend half an hour with this new game that I don't give a crap about and then still not have anything reasonable or interesting to say about it. If you're think it's cool out. And you want to talk about it, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And then the listeners then get those thoughts that come genuinely from a genuine place of interest.
Well, you're missing out because Hi-Fi Rush is very rad. The biggest reason I wish that you would have played it is because I haven't been able to connect with anybody that has had a similar experience with Hi-Fi Rush because of my background as a drummer, because I love the game. It's a great game. It is an excellent rhythm game, and their approach to accessibility in rhythm games is phenomenal. Everything on the screen is popping to the beat. There are many different indicators of where the beat is. Your character snaps and taps his foot to the beat. You have a flying robot kitty head that pulses to the beat. There's an additional button you can press that brings something up on the screen that shows you where the beat is. There are a bunch of tutorials. The game is fantastic at helping people feel the beat as they're playing the game, because that's the whole game. Everything you do, it's on the beat. Regardless of when you hit the attack button, he attacks on the next beat. You do extra damage if you press the button on the beat, like a rhythm game would. My issue with this, and this I specifically wrote in my notes, this is my pretentious drummer take, that I haven't been able to express to anyone accurately, because I haven't spoken to anyone else that is like a hardcore musician or even particularly plays the drums. And so you might be able to parse through this better than anyone else has.
Hit me with it.
In the game, you want to hit the button on the beat, and then your character he attacks on the following beat. If you miss, if you're late in the button press, he still attacks on that next beat. So no matter what happens, your character is on the beat. My issue is that because of how my mind works playing drums and keeping an internal beat, this is something I'm very adept at. I've played drums for 25 years. I feel it naturally. I don't care about all the signal. I get where the beat is. It's not a struggle for me. My inclination is to start an attack pattern on a downbeat. So if the song's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I press the button on 1. But he attacks on 2. And so if I have a 4-beat combo, I want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, super attack. But instead it goes, it's like, it's hard to say it out loud, but it's like 1, attack, 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 hit, where it's off by a beat of where I want it to be. And again, this might not translate at all for those listening because it's hard to like talk through it without like a metronome playing. But that's been my biggest disconnect. And it's not the fault of the game necessarily. It's just that's been my biggest struggle in like being in love with the combat. It's like it's a little bit, it feels a little bit off because it is. It is a little bit off from the way I want it to be functioning.
Yeah. Your inclination is to, with your physical hands, because you play drums, your inclination is to create movements or actions that fall within the 4/4 structure of the music. However, because the action is delayed after your input by a beat, it's like you're having to start your own 4/4 structure one beat ahead of the music, and so it doesn't feel like it's lining up properly.
Yeah. And you certainly don't have to start a combo on a downbeat. You can start a combo whenever you want, but that feels bad to me.
Right.
Again, because I'm used to keeping the beat. That is the entire point of playing the drums. So that's been my biggest disconnect. All of that aside, like, again, that's not the fault of the game. That's just my personal experience. And it's unfortunate that it impacts my ability to, like, get into the combat and get into the flow, especially. Like, I have to trick my brain to do it a way that it doesn't want to do it. But, like, everything else about the game is fantastic. And just the fact that you play drums, I think that you would like it. But also, like, the atmosphere and style of the game is such a combination of anime and, like, 90s cartoons that's, like, totally right up your alley. It's very corny. Like, the writing is pretty cheesy. But again, that's the kind of the style. It's over the top and it's kind of corny. I just think that you would like it. And I was kind of like, when they initially showed it at the developer showcase, I kind of had a little bit of a muted reaction to it just because it didn't particularly speak to me in any significant way. But seeing everyone talking about the game is what made me go like, oh man, all right. Well, one, it's on Game Pass, so of course I should play it. But like everybody being excited about it, I should give this a shot. So it kind of surprised me that you were like so adamantly like, no, I'm not interested at all in it.
Yeah, yes. On its face, it seems like something I should be really into. I'll say I don't enjoy games that employ rhythm mechanics as a supplement to the action, yeah. I don't enjoy games that include rhythm as a supplement to the action. What do you mean by that? If I'm going to be playing a rhythm game, I want it to be in the context of like playing an instrument.
Oh, so if you're gonna, you want it to be Guitar Hero.
Yeah. Yes, I that's the specific experience I'm looking for, because I find that games that use a beat or use rhythm to dictate flow of gameplay, I feel like I run into the issue you're encountering with Hi-Fi Rush, just in different ways because different games use that differently. Like Crypt of the Necrodancer, and then the Zelda version of that. Yes. There's a first-person shooter that's beat oriented. I don't remember what it's called. BPM. Yeah. Yes.
And then also the Metal whatever Hellsinger.
That came out last year. Games like that, because when I'm playing a game, I need it to be happening in my flow, in my pace. Yeah. I don't want the game dictating the flow or pace, unless it's in the context of an instrument and making music specifically. So that's why, at first blush, when I see this thing, I automatically like step back from it, because like I've tried that with several other different games before and it hasn't worked for me for the reason I just stated. So that's why when they showed it, I was like, it's going to be one of those and I'm probably going to have that experience, so I'm not going to engage with it.
I think that is fair. I will say, and this would normally almost be a knock against it, what I've been talking about, because when I play, like I played a little BPM, and there's another first person game besides, because I haven't played the Metal Hellsinger one, but there's another first person game that's on the beat like that I like those far more because the action happens when I press the button. So I am creating my own flow to the music. There isn't a delay in my input to the action like there is in Hi-Fi Rush. But that might make it different to you. Because, like, what I'm having to do is separate my desire to create a pattern and just only pay attention to a metronome, not to any kind of, like, actual musical structure that's happening in the song.
Right.
And that's been a challenge for me, but it's making me enjoy it and appreciate it in a different way. I don't think there's like a right or wrong or a good or bad approach to like rhythm-based combat like that, but it is definitely different than any other rhythm-based action game that I've played before.
Okay.
One other thing to comment about, which, like, without getting too deep in this, and I think maybe it's a good transition into you talking about your experience with Forspoken, is the comparison in the writing style. There's a huge conversation happening online after Forspoken came out of like the cringe dialogue in that game. And everybody, like, you know, going to task over Forspoken and saying how bad it was because of the dialogue style. And then Hi-Fi Rush comes out in like a similar kind of witty, snarky attitude, but everybody's like, oh, it's great. And then I saw this like anti-criticism crowd that I always love coming out and be like, what? You guys were just shitting on Forspoken, and Hi-Fi Rush is like literally the same dialogue. And I'm like, have you ever opened your eyes before? Like, literally look at these two games. Forspoken is this hyper-realistic, well, I guess the actual graphical quality maybe doesn't make it hyper-realistic, but it's attempting to make this hyper-realistic, self-serious fantasy tone with the central character who is basically like, this is a bunch of bullshit, right? I don't care about anything that's happening. Versus Hi-Fi Rush, which is just like goofiness and very fourth wall breaking fun, and they're making like all of the characters have food names. Like your character is Chai, and the main bad guy's name is Kale. There's a dude you meet his name is Macaron, and he's like this big buff dude, and like it's very, very dumb in a 90s cartoon way.
Right.
It's also this crazy over the top animated colorful style. It's just like these two games could not be more different in tone and in style, but because they both have snarky main characters, people are like, it's the same game. And it's so stupid and such a straw man. I just had to call it out.
Yes. Because
if you have seen online people complaining about Hi-Fi Rush being similar to Forspoken, dude, it isn't. It isn't at all. So how about you tell me about Forspoken?
Yeah, I'm glad you connected those two because I do want to talk about it. Because I also feel that I've seen all the Forspoken discourse as well about the writing and stuff. I feel like my issues with it are I do not think the game is good. I'm not going to defend it here, but I think it's a different category of bad that it falls under that I feel like helps contextualize why it is the way it is. And it's a pretty simple statement. Forspoken is a high fantasy young adult novel.
Sure.
Made into a video game. And I feel like that sentence encapsulates everything you need to know about it. Because like it's from the mixed race female main protagonist character, which is like love to see it, but like that's a very prototypical YA novel protagonist now.
Well, and also her backstory cool. too.
Yes,
her backstory as well. Like that. Yeah. That's what makes it so. Because I read like this big expose on Kotaku about it,
right?
And that's what really rubbed me the wrong way about the game is the way that they developed this character. One, they have 0 black people on their staff that wrote the game, and they consulted with people of color, which is like the most bullshit term ever. But like the fact that she's like a criminal orphan living in the city, like it's the most tropey black person background in a video game.
Well, they don't make her out to be a criminal. They make her out to be like, and she's
working with a gang and she stole a car.
No, like, but not like, and she's doing those things like to survive in a way that I feel like
that's how it always is.
In a lazy way is maybe not lazy is not the right term, but in a very boilerplate way is highlighting the experience of a lot of people of color or minorities in this country, where they're put into situations and they're brought up in environments where they don't have access to things that other people do, and so they feel like they have to resort to taking those things in order to survive and get by. And so like they're playing on some of that a little bit, which that part is like the least offensive of the things that I'm that stuck out to me. A hetero white male who's 30.
I think that's fair. Neither of us are in a position to comment on.
Yeah.
I only bring it up because it was a black woman who wrote this article that I read.
Sure.
And she's the one that brought up all these issues that I'm taking her at her word that kind of stuff is problematic.
Totally. That's totally fair. The things that jumped out at me that I can kind of impart were it's things like when I say young adult novel, and I use the term boilerplate very intentionally. It's like every YA novel comes off to me as if it thinks it's very clever, and it's because it's trading on the ignorance of its audience, where like the audience maybe hasn't experienced these tropes in fiction before, so they're going to encounter them in this thing for the first time and think it is this like crazy deep and thoughtful rumination on all of these social issues or these structures, and it's simply because it's their first time experiencing it and they don't know that it really is a theme or a trope that spans decades or centuries. And so like for example, she's having a deep think about her life and the directions in which she can go, and she's trying to figure out how she's gonna get out of this bad situation with the gang. And she's sitting on top of a hotel sign in New York City because that's where people go to think, and the name of the hotel is the Crossroads Hotel. She has a copy. Yeah, she has a copy of Alice in Wonderland that she likes to read in her apartment. She says down the rabbit hole at a certain point when she's in the new, like it's shit like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like it for a teenager, a young adult who is perhaps reading a fantasy novel for their first or second time, encounters things like that where, to an audience who's familiar with the parlance of fiction, like would see those things and go, yeah, obviously this shit's going to happen later. Or this is foreshadowing this and this and this and this. I already know how this stuff's going to play out. For someone experiencing that for the first time, it makes them feel clever because they get to tease something out. But it's like it's a manufactured feeling of cleverness on the part of the audience. And it feels like this game is just trading on that structure and that medium really, really hard. And so as someone who's been reading fantasy novels for like 25 years, 22 to 23 years, like
it'd been there, done that.
Yeah. It's like, this is some stupid shit. Like
it reminds
this is the laziest, dumbest shit.
So, and I know you didn't watch the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones, but there was a scene in the final season, maybe the final episode, of Daenerys after she's gone full bad guy, right? Spoilers for Game of Thrones. And there's a shot of her standing over her army, and it's from the front, so you see her facing the camera, and from behind, one of her dragons spreads its wings and flies off. And the way that it's framed, it looks like she sprouts wings as the dragon goes up. And there was a tweet from somebody that went super viral for all the wrong reasons, because the person was like, this is the coolest shot in the history of television. And like someone quoted the tweet, and that's what went viral. And the person said baby's first metaphor, because are you that's the coolest shot, like that's the deepest, most meaningful thing that's ever happened on TV. She's sprouting wings because she's a bad guy now. Ooh, so deep. And that it just reminds me of what you're talking about.
Baby's first is absolutely
baby's
what
first
I'm talking
metaphor
about. That's a good encapsulation of it. Absolutely. And the thing that makes it the thing that makes it feel gross is that there's an intentionality there, because the people who are creating this are very familiar with those things, and they know that their audience is not, and so they don't have to try hard to make something really good. They just need to make it good enough for an audience who doesn't know any better, and that's what this game feels like. And I don't mean to say that to like point a finger at any of the devs or any of the writers, or say like, you're horrible people for, you know, being lazy and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think game developers are actually lazy, or writers for that matter. It's just like some things, not everything can be really good.
Yes.
Let's just say that. Not everything can be really good. The one nice thing I'll have to say about it is that once you get used to it a little bit, the movement around the world, as that expands and you get more XP to like more points to spec into it, like the movement system and the magic parkour,
right,
as they call it, that system of, I'll call it their movement system, because I refuse to call it the other thing.
Marketing.
Yeah, that like feels pretty good after a while, and you really get into like a flow state moving through the world. That's pretty cool. And another thing,
is it engaging though, or are you just kind of pressing forward and holding circle?
No, there's a lot of control to it. You get to, there's a lot of directionality and midair control and stuff like that to it.
Because there wasn't a ton of it in the demo. It was mostly just the running and like climbing. They didn't have the lasso thing. And so I was curious if when they add more elements, if it's more engaging. Because I just felt like I was just holding forwards.
It definitely is. And I will say structurally, the game is... it's smart about how it's structured. It feels like they had a good idea for a movement mechanic and then built the world around that mechanic, as opposed to the other way around, because there's like 3 main branches. There's a hub city with like, it's a spoke and wheel, or a hub and spoke setup, where you have the central city and there are these spokes you can go off to for the different bosses that unlock. It's a linear thing that you go through, and each area, it's like basically like a literal spoke. It's pretty much a hallway between mountains that you're going through. So that plays into the movement mechanics really well, because you don't really have to stop to do any of the side stuff. You can just flow movement your way all the way down this canyon and have fun and pick up things where you feel like it, and then arrive at the end and fight the boss and continue to the next chapter. And like, that's kind of fun in a way, but also completely strips it of any like sense of weight or accomplishment and anything, you know, that any kind of real reward other than just like, I had sort of fun doing the movement stuff. So that was pretty much my takeaway.
What about like the actual combat part of it? Like how far have you gotten? What kind of variety do you have in the spells and all that stuff?
So I almost beat the game in about 7 hours.
Oh, geez. So you skipped all the side stuff.
I skipped every side quest, and I skipped every cutscene after the first hour and a half.
Okay.
And so 7 hours in...
So instead of playing Hi-Fi Rush, you played a game that you didn't think was very good and skipped everything.
I played this before Hi-Fi Rush even came out, man. I've been playing better games since Hi-Fi Rush came out, baby. But yeah, I paid $70 to spend 7 hours playing a
a game that you didn't like that much.
But I got to talk about it on the podcast, and that's content. So you're welcome. But yeah, I think in terms of the combat, it's competent. And you know, like it's the way the powers can coexist is totally not the right word. The way the powers can be, they can complement themselves a little bit, because there's like a few different branches of magic that are on different recharge timers. So like you'll cast one, like you'll create like a plant turret that'll be there for like 8 to 10 seconds and will do some damage. Then you do another like a DOT effect, damage over time effect on the enemy, and then you go to your main magic thing and like are blasting through stuff until those timers reset and you can cast them again and keep going. And there's a decent flow to the combat. It's very floaty. I don't think the movement system works well inside of combat. It's just not meant for that kind of granular scale. So moving around during combat like either feels like you're going way too fast or so totally not fast enough, because it really is going from like 1 to 10 in terms of normal movement and their magic movement system.
Okay.
So
They don't have a marketing term for that?
No, I don't think they've ever
stuff.
referred to it by another name. And so like that's a little that doesn't feel quite right all the time, but there's a lot of variety of the environments, and like, you know, they clearly did a lot of environmental art. Whether or not you think it's good is up to you.
Yeah. Like,
I don't know that it's great, but there's
I watched
lot of
a
it.
lot of videos, and again, it just feels so, I don't like, not corporate. Like it feels so generic.
Yeah.
And I think that the correlation to those, like, you know, I remember when I used to work at a bookstore, and like every week there was a new YA novel that came out, and they were all the same.
They're
and
the
that's
same.
what this feels like.
Yes.
It's such a good comparison.
I'm very proud of that one.
Yeah. No, it makes
That's probably
sense.
the best thing I have to say on this entire podcast. But hey, stick around. You never know when I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm glad we knocked that out early. Well, cool. Anything else on Forspoken? Like, do you think you're gonna finish it? Or are you gonna
No. No way, Jose. That one is uninstalled.
Yikes. Well, I've got a couple of quick ones, and then I know you have like a handful of things that are on the older side, so maybe we can get through those quick, because I know we got some other big hitters to talk about.
Sure.
I want to mention Tunic specifically. After last podcast, when I talked about Tunic and like the good experience that I had, but also like how it just, you know, I just struggled to like stick with it, and it got a little frustrating. I was like, I need to play it again. I need to go back. And so I did. And then I got my ass kicked for about an hour because I had forgotten everything about the game. And then I stopped playing it again. So it was a mistake to go back to it because I did not have a good time. But it's a bummer because like there's so much there that I love that I wanted to go back. I wanted to give it another shot. And it just doesn't work for me. Just the combination of the kind of floaty, weird combat, just the difficulty and the nature of what the enemies can do to you, the uncertainty of or like what items do and where to go and how the map works. It doesn't quite come together in a way that's compelling enough for me to want to figure it out, which is a bummer. But there are lots of games like that like I appreciate, but I just can't ever really get into.
Totally.
And then I want to mention the Quarry. This is a game a buddy of mine has been dying to play God of War Ragnarok, so we did a swap. He got the better end of that deal because I gave him God of War Ragnarok, and then I borrowed his copy of the Quarry. And so I loved Until Dawn. My wife and I played through that game together. I think you and Kara played through it together too, didn't you?
Yeah.
And we had a great time. It was like a huge surprise for me. It was
So
really
good.
high up on my Game of the Year list that year. I was blown away by the experience. And I played the Dark Pictures Man of Medan and laughed. We laughed our way out of that game after like 2 hours. It was horrible.
So bad.
Zero interest in any of the other ones. But people have been saying good things about the Quarry. A friend of mine let me borrow it for free. And Kelly, like, she likes playing games with me when they're like this. When we, you know, they're not as interactive where she doesn't have to hold a controller and do. She's not good at using the left stick and the right stick both. We have a Minecraft series that we played co-op where that is very clear on YouTube. But so she was really excited to play it. And also a spooky game. She loves the spooky stuff. So we started up, and at this point, I'm just convinced that Until Dawn was lightning in a bottle, and that all the pieces just came together the right way, because this is so cringy, and like it's hard to separate because there's an element of that which is clearly intentional.
Yeah.
They have been smart enough to lean into the fact that they, like, even in Until Dawn, most of those characters were unlikable, but like you were motivated to save them because you play video games. You want to do a good job. And this game, it feels like they're leaning more heavily into, we know you're going to want to kill all these annoying ass Gen Z douchebags. Let's do it in really fun ways. And we played for probably 2 hours, and we didn't even get to anything scary, minus the intro, the prologue section, which had some good spooks. But like, we're not into the meat of the game yet. So in fairness, I'm sure a lot of the fun comes from those more scary moments in the interactivity. And in the setup, it's mostly just these people standing in a circle talking to each other. But the way that the mechanics work is so, and this sounds harsh, they're poorly designed. Like, they just do a bad job of the interactivity of conversations. There's this awkward pause whenever like a character finishes speaking and they're going into a dialogue choice. They like pause for what feels like 3 seconds, and then the options come up on screen for you to pick. And then you wait like another second or two for them to actually deliver. So it creates these awkward pauses, and it also freezes the camera on like a super extreme close-up of their face, and the faces do not look good in this game. Ariel Winter, the girl from Modern Family, hers is like the most high res because she's the most famous person in this.
Of course.
But like all of the character faces look super bad. And it's frustrating because it makes everything feel so much slower. And at least where we are now, there is not a lot happening. Okay. So it being boring and slow when it's supposed to be a scary game, like it doesn't make a good first impression.
Yeah, that's a shame. I wonder if those pauses and things, if those are born out of like feedback from people who maybe don't play games all that often. And like, there's no warning when those choices are going to come up by,
but these aren't even, they're not,
blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
I understand what you're saying. These aren't even timed options.
Oh.
So like these are just, you're just standing in a circle, just having a conversation. There's no pressure to pick one quickly. Before the option even comes up, they pause. So like at least bring it up earlier and then let me sit at it. Because the other problem is a lot of the contextual dialogue options are the same or don't make sense. Like I should have written down a specific example, but I couldn't remember one of like someone will ask a question and so it gives you 2 options in response, but neither of the options really map back to being a good answer to the question. And it's just very awkward. And then a lot of times, which is something I remember Fallout 4 got a lot of crap for.
I was about to say that, yeah.
That the option it gives you doesn't totally map to what the person actually says.
Right.
So it kind of like misguides you into answering in a way that you wouldn't have wanted to. And that's super frustrating. In a game where that's the only thing you're doing,
totally,
that's very, very frustrating. So it's been like a week and a half since we started it, and we haven't gone back to it. We will, because Kelly will want to at some point. I doubt we're going to make it all the way through if it continues along the same lines as it has been. But if it ramps up the spooks and that stuff starts happening, we can kill off some of the more annoying characters quickly, which I guess, to be fair, is all of them. But that'll make it more fun.
That's how I spent my time in Man of Medan.
Right, just killing everybody.
Just like, these characters suck. I want to try and kill them as fast as possible.
Yes. Yeah,
which is not a great way to play those games.
No, it isn't.
You tend not to get all the answers you want when you play them like that.
And then the only other one that I'll mention quickly, Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga. This is one that y'all got me for Christmas, which I was very excited to play. And there's so much game in this game. It is huge. I have put well over 10 hours into this game, and I'm like halfway through Return of the Jedi.
Oh, God.
And I still have all the prequels and all the sequels to do, because it hits, each movie hits on 8 to 10 specific big moments in those movies, but they also each have like 3 to 4 big open areas where they're all like the hidden challenges to find, the blue boxes, to find the ones that look like stoplights, whatever those are called.
Oh, right.
And like to unlock the ships, and they have little side quests that you can do. There's so much there that like it's becoming too much, where I've had to streamline a little bit. And then once I get through everything, then it'll be fun to just go back in the free play mode and bring whatever characters I want to do all the little hidden stuff. But I'm having a great time with it. There's such a good variety in what you're asked to do. And like, there was the boss battle and from episode 5 when Luke fights Darth Vader in Cloud City.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Star Wars. But
Okay.
the way they handle that scene is super fun and dynamic, and like you have some straight up just lightsaber fighting between the two of them, but there's also like a little mini game when Vader's throwing the stuff at Luke and keeps hitting him. They just find really creative ways to like mix up some of the gameplay, which is exciting. But yeah, I'm having a really great time with it.
Good.
There's just so much there.
Sure.
Like you could spend 100 hours playing that game if you wanted to get everything. It's pretty crazy.
Has your son is too young to know what the heck's going on, but has your daughter expressed any interest in watching you play it, or?
Yeah, so it's funny. So she on Disney Plus there is a series of Frozen that is Lego. It's like a little mini series, and she loves it. So she's also watched the Star Wars movies with me a bunch of times. Even fairly recently when she actually follows it. Like she loves Yoda, she loves Chewbacca, she loves the Ewoks. So I was like, hey Penny, like I got this new Star Wars Lego game. Do you want to play it with me? And she has like a little toy controller, or I'll give her like my Xbox controller and not turn it on. So she'll sit there and like press the buttons and play with me. So we've done that a few times, which has been super fun. And she has the big Legos, not like the actual Legos that we always play with.
Like the Duplo
but she
Legos
knows
or whatever.
She connects with the Lego thing from the Lego Frozen stuff. So she kind of gets the animation style. So yeah,
she
that's
gets that
fun.
It's Star Wars in that style.
Oh yeah,
and all that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
cool.
When Chewbacca was on there, she was like Chewbacca. So yeah, it's been very
That's
fun.
Awesome.
She doesn't want to play it as much as I want to play it,
Sure,
which is a lot, but yeah, we played it a few times and it's been a good time.
Awesome, man.
Cool. Well, I know you got a bunch of stuff. How about you tell me? So there are some games on your list that I don't think I even know what the hell they are. So let's talk about those. Tell me about Dome Keeper.
Yeah, Dome Keeper came out recently. It's a really small game. It's like it's sort of a run based, like it's a mashup between a little bit of a tower defense game and like Dig Dug. If you know Dig Dug. So basically the loop is you're in a little bubble dome on a hostile planet, and it's 2D, and you have a little jetpack guy, and you go down and you dig into the earth and you get materials and bring them back up, hopefully in time for the next wave of aliens to attack your dome. It has a really cool, like minimalist, very limited color scheme aesthetic.
I have seen that game, and it looked super dope. I just couldn't remember the name of it. Yeah, that's awesome.
It was a very cool concept, but then it's supposed to be like there are ways to kind of shake up the runs and like have different difficulties and adjust some values and things like that going into your runs. I wish it was like a little more long form, because like my one run was like a half an hour or something like that, and I feel like if I were to do another run in that game, it's kind of the same thing.
Oh, like you don't carry anything over?
No, like the resources are just like going to be in slightly different places, and there wasn't really much you can unlock outside of each run, kind of a thing. It seems like as you play it, you unlock more difficulty options and maybe some new types of enemies, or like a new type of dome, stuff like that. So there are a few things that you can get, but it was just like, it was pretty feature light, I will say.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, because I really dug the look of it. The aesthetics, the visual style's very cool.
It reminded me a little bit of Luftrauser, like more variation, but that very like 80s looking, like original Game Boy style.
Yeah, I feel like they're trading on that a little bit. Yeah, it's like really nicely animated pixel art.
I assumed that there would be like resources that would carry over from run to run, so you're slowly leveling up and powering up your base.
That's what I was hoping for, and it doesn't really have any of that.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity, because like when you go up and fight the wave, you're controlling the turrets on the dome and popping off abilities and all these extra things, and like that's pretty fun and engaging, and it makes me wish there was just a little bit more meat to it. So, but you never know what kinds of things they'll add.
And I also have to say, as a marketing professional, Dome Keeper, not a very good name.
Yeah.
Exactly to my point. I remembered this game being very striking, Did not at all recognize the name.
Right.
Speaking of games with very underwhelming names, how about Rogue Tower? Sounds like a freaking mobile game.
It in some ways basically is. It's a again, it's a run-based game. It's a tower defense game. But it's these little tiles, and every wave you get to choose where the next tile spawns, so you have a little bit of control over the directionality of where things are coming from. And you can choose to either fight, a single direction tower, double, triple, or quadruple direction. So obviously the 4-direction one, they could come from all 4 directions of the tile, and as you're expanding, you get to choose which of those 4 directions you're building it out in. Every tile is randomized to have different types of resources and different terrain. It's your typical tower defense fair where there's a bunch of different tower types, and there's like elevation benefits for certain types of towers. You're upgrading them. You're getting coins when you kill enemies and surviving waves and all that other stuff. And like, you're earning XP. Oops, sorry, I bumped my mic. You're earning XP as you do this, and this game does have an out of run progression system,
right?
Where you're spending your XP and unlocking cards that can be drawn during your run. So like, so one thing I didn't realize is there's a little bit of like an XP economy and a card draw economy to it, where you can unlock a bunch of cards, like for a bunch of different upgrades and stuff. But if you do that, then when you do your runs, you could be drawing cards that you don't necessarily need. You know what I mean? If that makes sense, because you only get a certain number of draws at certain times during your run. So there's a little bit of an economy there, and some cards need a certain number of other cards to have been unlocked before you can unlock those. And so it feels like, and there's also an option for you to like reset. So you can like start from 0 again. And I think that's in there for if you've like spec'd too broadly in your upgrades. So that's interesting, but I don't want to start over because that sucks.
Yeah.
And so I kind of reached the end of the progression tree where I was going, and it wasn't really going to get any more exciting from there. And I could reset and go in a different direction, but I don't want to do that, so I probably am done with it. But it was very fun while it lasted. It gave me entertainment for like a few days, and it was fun, and it was super cheap on Steam.
Nice. And that definitely seems like it checks a lot of the boxes of stuff that you typically like.
Yeah,
in games,
for sure.
Speaking of the cards, I actually forgot to mention I checked out Marvel Snap this past month. Because I don't play mobile games, but some people I respect their opinions have been talking about Marvel Snap a lot, just of like, it's surprisingly good. So I was like, you know what, I'll download it, I'll give it a shot. And I don't play a lot of like collectible card games or mobile games, so like I don't have as much frame of reference for it. But I think like it having the Marvel wrapping obviously makes it more appealing to me, because it's fun with all the characters that I recognize, and there's a lot of like C, D, F tier Marvel villains and characters and stuff in there, which are fun to discover. It's much more simple than I anticipated, given how people talk about it and like are super hardcore into it. And maybe there's more complexity the more types of cards you get, because obviously you can build a deck, and each card has like a special little power that affects the other cards or where you place them and all that kind of like traditional card game stuff. But like, it's a game that it would be super easy to pick up for 15 minutes if I was in a position where I had 15 minutes and only my phone. And frankly, as an excuse to stop using Twitter, which I'm always looking for, it's a potentially good option. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm never gonna get hardcore into it, but I would definitely play some more just for fun. The matches are super quick. You can do them in just a couple of minutes, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, there's not a ton there, or at least I'm not deep enough to have a lot of like hardcore thoughts about the meta of Marvel Snap, of like which characters are the ones. But it's been a decently good time.
Yeah, they're like, I can't play those card based like deck builder games anymore, because like I have expended so much of my life like playing Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic and Pokemon. And it's like, those are the systems that I know, and I've spent so much time like mulling over how to build the perfect deck, and spent like just hours and hours and hours of my life doing that. And so when I encounter another deck building game, I see that and I think about all the time you could invest in it. I'm just like, I don't want to fucking do that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not up for it anymore.
I was never a hardcore card game person.
Sure.
But I can say with a lot of confidence that Marvel Snap has nowhere near the level of complexity
I'm
of
sure.
like, even Pokemon, which has way less complexity than a Magic the Gathering does.
Yeah. Careful
But
what you say. All those Pokemon card league weirdos will be shooting out emails at us.
They don't know how to use the internet.
Oh, okay. Like, just because they play card-based games,
that's actually the
doesn't mean
opposite. They're like some of the most chronically online people that you could probably imagine. They don't know how to use the internet except for Reddit, I should say. That would have been a better insult. Reddit and 4chan.
God.
All right. So how about Icarus?
Icarus. All right. This is. Ooh, I should fact check this. I want to say this is from the guy who came up with PUBG.
Okay. Player unknown.
Is that right? Icarus developer.
You didn't research this before.
It's a survival game. Who developed it? Rocketworks. Dean Hall. Who is Dean Hall?
Oh, of course.
That's the guy.
I think actually Dean Hall was the first person that wrote an email.
Oh, DayZ, not PUBG. He came up with DayZ.
Okay.
He's the person typically credited with having done the lion's share of the work on the development of DayZ.
Has DayZ hit 1.0 yet?
Yeah, it's out. Yeah.
I just know it was in like beta for like 10 years.
Well, it started out as an Arma 3 mod, and then they remade it like in a different engine, I believe, as a standalone. And so it's been out for a long time. So the DayZ guy created this. It is a survival game, sci-fi. It has roguelike elements, where it's run based, where like you go down to a planet. This is the base game I'm talking about. You like the initial launch version of the game. You go down to a planet. You can pick a biome to start in. It's the same map every time, so you know where the resources are. And you go down, you can build a base, and you're leveling up a tech tree and trying to get resources, and then getting the most rare resources possible within it's like 3 weeks or a month real world time, like real Earth time, and then a timer expires, and you have to extract back up into space with your materials, and you unlock upgrades and get rare gear, and there's like a whole like tiered loot system of upgrades and crafting stuff up at like a space station, and then you go back down, and it's a new cycle of like 3 or 4 weeks. They recently released a version of it that does not reset. There is no timer. Another important thing about this is there's permadeath for your characters. So while you could go down on the planet and your character could die and you lose everything aside from the upgrades and things that you've kept at the space station. This survival thing, I think your character can die in this version that doesn't reset, but you could bring a new character down and all of your structures and stuff will still be there. It's not like it wipes the planet.
Yeah.
So that's what I played a little bit of. I think it needs more time in the oven because it's a beautiful game. There's a lot of really great, well crafted survival game systems in there, and I should know. I've played a lot of them. There's a pretty good loop. It's just the pacing of it feels very off, and I think it's because it's intended for the original structure, not this kind of newer long form play. So it feels a little compressed in areas and elongated in others. That feels unnatural and imbalanced in a way that maybe it doesn't if you play the normal mode or whatever.
Okay.
So I spent probably 8 hours in a world messing around with some stuff, just trying to like get my feeling for how it was structured and looking up information on it and stuff. And it was pretty fun. I don't know that I'm going to go back to it unless like I'll follow the development and see if there are significant updates to this version of it. And if there are, I'll go back, of course, at some point. But like there's enough there that's interesting. It's just I don't like the permadeath stuff. I don't like to have my time wasted. I like to waste my own time. Thank you very much. So that's kind of where I'm at with Icarus, is waiting. It's a kind of a wait and see thing for me, but I know it is really popular. People really like it. And because it has such a long form progression to it, it's something you can return to a lot. And you can play with, co-op and stuff as well.
Right.
So, and visually it looks terrific.
Yeah, I was looking up some screens and it looked really good, and also a bunch of Kid Icarus came up too. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we got a couple first-person shooters on our list, so maybe let's work through those to keep things...
keep it fresh.
Yeah, and like nice, categorical.
Sure.
So I played a fairly hefty amount of Far Cry 6. I mentioned this on the last pod that I was like super in the mood for a game like this, just like a brain off first person open world game where I can kill some stuff and have fun. And I did not like this game. I wanted to like this game. I knew going into it that people generally were pretty down on it, even compared to Far Cry 5, which a lot of people were down on. But it's like they do that thing which is like a Ubisoft thing that they love to do. More on Ubisoft later. But like they make you spend like 6 hours in the first area, and then they let you play the video game. I remember they did it in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. They did it in Valhalla. Like, that's their thing. I don't know why they structure their games that way, but like, I was so bored of that first area before they even put me out into the next bigger area, and so much of the stuff is the same that I already was like, I don't want to find another cache. I don't want to take down another like enemy base the same way. There was a really cool mission in between those things, like the last mission on your little island before you get to the big island, where you're like taking down these 2 giant ships and all the dudes on it. And there's a huge variety of ways you can engage. You can like hack the machine gun turrets, or like, take down the lights and do a sneak attack, or you can just go like full bore. And they give you these like super duper weapons, which are fun. So like you have like a big flamethrower thing. There's a sort of like a giant harpoon gun that you can use to take down like helicopters and shit. And then you also have the little rocket launcher thing that you wear on your back. So going like guns blazing is very fun because you have a lot of elements at your disposal.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's like the game wants you to start with stealth and then go loud once you mess it up, because you usually do. Because like if you just run into one of like the huge bases, or in particular that mission, enemies just keep spawning and spawning and spawning, and they call in reinforcements, and they have all these different types of enemies that like you're supposed to use different types of ammo for, like armor piercing versus flesh type ammos, where like there was a base in particular that I died 3 times on, and then I was like, that's it. I'm done with this game. And part of it was the enemies, but also part of it was just like some bugginess and just like non-polish. Because the first time I was going from rooftop to rooftop using like a silent sniper rifle, and it was super fun. And I jumped from one rooftop to the next, and my character just like didn't clamber. She just fell, so I fell to my death. Which I was like, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. You were supposed to clamber there, and for whatever reason you didn't. So the second time, I was using a separate silenced gun, kind of like I was shooting out some of the lights and the cameras and stuff. And I shot a camera, and an enemy who was like not that close to the camera heard it anyway. And they didn't just like turn and look at the camera and were like, oh no. They turned, looked at the camera, and then looked at me and were like, go get her. Like they knew immediately where I was. And I was like up on top of this water tower. And I was like, what the, like, come on. And then they sound the alarm, and 50 dudes come in, and a giant tank comes in and blows me to shit. So then the third time I was like, let me just do a more traditional stealth route. I'll go around the outside, I'll take care of the guards, and I dropped down behind this enemy to go stealth kill him. And I wasn't that close to him. Like, it was on this, sort of like an overhang of a building, and he was on one end of the building, and I dropped down on the other, and he still heard me and turned around, and then it was like, get her, and did the alarm bell again, and I was like 20 feet away. So it was like, it's stuff that, like, I don't know if that's how they want it to perform. Like, right. Do they want the enemies to be that on top of that stuff? Because otherwise the enemy is like so brain dead. Like, they don't really sit behind cover. They don't like use any sort of tactics to get at you. They just stand out in the open and shoot.
Totally.
And so, like, but then other specific times they're all over my shit. And so that was just like, that's what made it just kind of like the final straw for me, where I died 3 times and did not want to have to do this big base again. And then I just never went back to it. And it was a bummer because I played like a good amount of it. And there's some fun to be had. Like, the shooting feels fine. I do really enjoy the crazy weapons, and also just generally the weapon customizability that you have to add silencers and different types of ammo. And they have all these different paints that you can put on the guns, which is always fun to customize and bling out your stuff. But it was just, it felt too similar to regular Ubisoft games, because they're all the same, that there wasn't enough to it to make me want to keep going. Like, Giancarlo Esposito, amazing actor, but they do the thing in this game that they have with all the other villains, which is like, he's barely in it. He occasionally comes over the radio in like some cutscenes that like really slow down the story, but otherwise he's not that engaged with what's happening. So that character in the story isn't pushing me through. So I don't know. I was disappointed in a way, but it's what I expected. I guess my tolerance was lower than I thought it would have been. I thought it would have just been a fun brain off game, but there still wasn't enough even for that. So I need something. I need like a big open world game, because that's my jam. That's my relax type of game, and I don't have one, so I need to find one.
Yeah, I did beat Far Cry 6 when it came out. I probably did about like 70% of the side stuff. I did quite a bit of the side stuff. But I mean, at a certain point, I was just like, I gotta finish this thing, or I'm gonna put it down and never pick it back up.
Right.
And it goes on a lot longer than you think it does.
I believe it.
It really does. It's like, I felt like it was the last mission about 7 times. But like there was some fun bombast in there. The weird thing about it, though, like when it gets into those scripted moments, it really feels like it's held together by duct tape and spit. And like, it's also strange because things won't behave during those scripted sections. Things don't behave as they would when you're in the open world necessarily. Enemies won't behave quite the same, and things don't have the same. It just feels different when you're in one of those sections, in terms of the way the world reacts to you. And so like that always kind of threw me off a bit as well. That one's a little hard to codify and like put words around, but there's just something about the way the enemies behaved and how like they would react to my presence and different things that felt like it was scaled back in some ways and amplified in others. To fit the situation, and that inconsistency sometimes made it feel really bad and unfair.
I mean, that kind of maps to my experience. Just the inconsistency of how the enemies interact with you wasn't super fun. Well, cool. How about let's tackle the high on life conversation.
Oh fuck. Oh god. Okay.
So I mean, like
we're an hour in. Okay.
Well, no, like this is not something that we need to spend any significant amount of time on, but we need to at least say it out loud. Totally. Which is that Justin Roiland is clearly a garbage human being and is currently going to be going to trial for various felonies and will be facing jail time. We'll see what happens.
Domestic
that part
battery
of it is separate from the actual video game High on Life.
Correct.
What's
it
the
is
name of the
difficult to
studio?
separate. It's difficult to separate because it's got his, it's got his stamp all over it.
Yeah,
right?
and he's a co-founder of the studio. Squanch Games,
Yeah.
I think is what it is. He's a co-founder of the studio, and they have since severed ties. He,
Right.
submitted his resignation, and they, I'm sure, gratefully accepted it.
Yeah.
By all accounts, he wasn't participating in writing the game, other than voicing some of the main characters, which I'm sure he did a heavy amount of improvisation, which is kind of his style. But yeah, I mean, the game was made not necessarily because of Justin Roiland. He obviously became sort of the face and figurehead because of his fame. So yeah, that's the Justin Roiland bucket we'll put in, which,
right.
beyond just me finding him annoying, I take no pleasure in all of the other stuff about him coming out. So specific to High on Life, I believe you finished this game.
I did. I beat it. And you know what? I kind of really liked it. Well, I liked it.
Okay.
I don't know that I'd go so far as to say I really liked it, but I had a
right.
pretty good time with it. In a way that surprised me because, I'm not a huge Rick and Morty fan. I enjoyed it for the first season or two, and then it kind of got to be the same thing over and over again, and you kind of see the patterns emerge and you go, okay. It's, it was baby's first Rick and Morty, and now it's old hat.
I remember because I found that show to be extremely unappealing, and then when we came over to y'all's house years ago, you wanted me to watch some, and so we watched the first maybe 4 episodes, and I didn't want to break your heart because you loved that show at the time, and again, it had just started, and I didn't know what to say to not make you sad. Because I despised that show.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. But I think in large part the humor works on me in this. And it's not I laughed out loud a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Which is more than many games cause me to laugh, I guess. But it was a lot of I would smile. The game made me smile a lot, and that's nice. That's nice.
It has a very irreverent, happy sort of attitude, so that makes sense.
It commits to itself in a way that is unapologetic, and you have to appreciate that at least a little bit, even looking at it from the outside. And so if you're into that at all, I think it hits that pretty. It hits that way more than it misses it. And there are, it's a perfectly competent game. It doesn't evolve significantly in terms of the gameplay throughout. It does in the way you traverse the world. You're unlocking different traversal abilities and things,
right.
And you're getting new weapons with new abilities and personalities and things. Because this is the game with the talking guns, and not Borderlands.
The
and,
guns talk?
Yo, they're Gatlings. Gatlings? I don't know. I just played it and don't remember. Gatlins, I think. Anyways, it's you know what? I liked it. There's the characters are fun and interesting. There's a scumbag alien who is a disabled and retired bounty hunter who lost his legs.
Sure. Yeah. He's one of the first I met that character.
Yeah. And he has some really great back and forths with your sister who's in the game. And there's some fun relationship development stuff going on between the three of you. And just by virtue of him being there all the time. And it very competently pulls off a lot of those writing moments in a way that had a lot of charm, and I think probably just surprised me more than anything. It wasn't necessarily the gameplay that kept me coming back, so I guess that probably speaks to the quality of the performances that the actors were giving.
Sure,
because they're the ones who made it really land. And there's a joke at the end about DLC. And when they made the joke, I was like, I think I might play that. I know, like the joke is that they're not going to have DLC.
Okay.
But I was like, I think I would. I think if they were to make it.
Well,
I probably
for what
would.
it's worth, like this game has been a huge success, and obviously being on Game Pass helps. But
sure,
even if they weren't intending on making DLC, that conversation's happening.
Yeah, probably. And
They'd be
I
stupid
totally
not
think
to.
there's a way in which they could do it, and it would be fun. Like, if not DLC, I would like for them to make a second one because, like, with the same characters, because I really enjoy the cast of characters, and in typical Rick and Morty fare, like any animated show, they have all these like weird little offshoot kind of one-off jokes that are characters or products or whatever. And there's a lot of that. Like, this game's filled with that kind of stuff. And there are some of those that are like, you know what? Every time that bit came up, I really liked it. And it would make me happy to see that bit happen maybe once or twice more. Yeah. Like there's always a television program going out on the alien planet. And it's like a bunch of ads or like talk shows or a bunch of different things. And there's one show that's just like, this dude's like, hey, yeah, I'm a guy. Yeah, I'm here. I'm coming at you. Oh, better watch out. Yep, it's me, still here. Are you listening? Are you watching? Oh, that's great. Yep, this is my show. Woo, this is a great show.
I am going to reach through this microphone and
you're gonna kill me.
you to death. Also, you should audition to voice one of the characters in Rick and Morty that Justin Roiland will no longer be doing, because you sound exactly like him.
Yeah. Well, look. There are people
it's not that hard to do.
Yeah, A, it's not that hard to do. B, people have said worse things about me. But yeah, you know what? Like, if you in any way are listening, well, if you're listening to this podcast and you in any way have ever enjoyed Rick and Morty, it's on High on Life is on Game Pass. Like, give it a shot.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you enjoy Rick and Morty, there is zero reason not to play this game if you have Game Pass.
I will say the humor, it's different.
It's not literally the same, but it's very much the same.
The humor, it hits a lot of the same highs, but it's in a different format. Like, it's coming at you constantly in a way that the show's a little more curated. And yeah, obviously you're exposed to it for less time at once. But they are really constantly going at it. But like I said, they hit more often than they miss.
Because again, I've only seen a handful of Rick and Morty episodes, and I've seen lots of clips, but it kind of reminds me, comedic wise and like approach wise, as a mishmash of Rick and Morty and Family Guy. Because Family Guy has that relentless jokes, and especially couching on, let's stretch this joke longer than is funny, and that makes it funny again. And for a lot of people, that isn't funny, but like that's their style, and that's like the style of humor is like that, with like a little bit of classic Simpsons reference thrown in of the just the way like the stores having funny names and a character having funny names and an item description having a like a weird quirky things. Well,
but
cool.
yeah, you're totally right on the extended bit. Like, it's funny. It's kind of not funny anymore, but now it's funny again. It's yes, absolutely. It's a lot of that.
Yeah. So what brought you back to Metro Exodus?
It's a good flipping game, man. It's a tremendous #gamer achievement.
Okay.
Damn, that game's good. I played it again, and I loved every second of it. I did all this stuff. I went everywhere. I did all the things, and I beat it in a day. I started it in the morning, and then I beat it and went to bed.
What's
that was like? My whole day.
I have not done that since like high school.
I've done
Actually,
that
that's a lie.
either.
I did that definitely when Skyrim came out, and I was depressed and didn't have a full-time job. But, like, you're an adult with a job and a house.
Yeah, man. I haven't done that in a long time. I did it on a weekend, and it was amazing. It was a great day. I love that game.
It's a good game. It is good.
Fuck. That I need another one. I really like where they ended it, if you get, like, the good ending or whatever. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The last bit of it, I didn't remember this. The last bit feels a little rushed. That last area you go through in the forest and stuff. A lot happens, and then it's kind of over, and then you go and do some stuff in a city, and then it's over after that. So that, because you have those like few really big open areas, two of them, and then you go to the forest, which is also pseudo open but a little more linear. I would say those two first big areas you spend a lot of time in and get a lot of meat out of it, and then the forest goes pretty quickly, city goes super quickly, and then the game's over. So pacing wise, it's not perfect, but man, it's a good game.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. The art direction is great. I enjoy the gunplay. It's not like as tight as a lot of games are, but it's kind of intentional.
I kind of like it for that.
Yeah, it feels a little grungy.
Yeah, nothing else feels quite like it.
Yeah, yep. And I mean, I love the story. I love the story in the second game too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I also like hearing all of the people doing really bad Russian accents. Well, maybe they're really good Russian accents. I don't know.
I started that game with like in Russian with English subtitles, and then immediately had to switch because I couldn't track the subtitles as I was trying to play. It was too much.
Yeah.
I would have rather played it that way, but it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I'm gonna wrap up my section of games.
Okay. With
some Scorn. And then we can wrap up your section of games before we talk a little bit of TV. We're already running long per usual. Yeah.
Well, this is look. Scorn is our game club game.
Yeah, that we both played.
Yes, we both did play it. At
we
one
both
point
played
in
January when we committed to playing it together.
Don't think that was a stipulation, but okay.
There's been one other episode. It would be very easy to fact check this. Adam, write in, fact check this. No, so Scorn, the best thing that I can say, similar to Tunic, but in a very different way, is a game that I respect more than I enjoy. And even using the word enjoy doesn't really apply to my experience with Scorn. I kind of put the game into thirds, where the middle third is the longest and the last third is quite short. But they're very, they feel like chapters. And there are chapters within those. But the first part of it...
three distinct areas.
Yeah. Because the first part of it is so much more about the atmosphere and the exploration and figuring out
there's less threat.
You're figuring out how you interact with the world.
I think that's super important because there is no dialogue in the game.
Right.
So it's all
there's not really
visual.
A story in the game.
Well, yeah, that's another another point.
Which I would put that in the negative column, but we'll get to that. Yeah, it's because in the beginning, as you're kind of exploring, and there's a lot of puzzles, and there's sort of like a sequence of events puzzle that you need to do in the right order. And for a lot of times, you're just pressing the buttons to see what happens, and then kind of piecing together the order of things. And then there's a couple other sections that are similar. And then in the middle third, which is more than a third, is where the combat happens.
Yeah,
and that's brutal, man. It is. Yeah, it is not fun at all. And you're
so slow.
It doesn't need to be fun. It not being fun is fine. The themes behind this game, we're going to spoil a little bit of Scorn, but there's a lot of hopelessness and pointlessness wrapped up in playing the game. And so I get, I would be okay with the combat not being that fun, but they make you do so much of it that it becomes too much. You can't get over it. If it was just a couple enemies that you had to figure out how to navigate with the bad shooting and the melee weapon that they give you at first, which is just horrible, it'd be one thing. But it's a couple hours. And the second area where there are enemies, there are so many enemies. And the game wants you to run away from a lot of them. Yeah. But you can't run away from a lot of them. And they throw multiples at you at a time, and it's
I use the term
really,
elevator
really
loosely, by the way.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
It's difficult
it's more
to assign names to things.
The bowels of a slug monster.
Yeah, that you ride up and down.
Right, yeah. But yeah, it's because there's a section after that, Ethan. Did you not get to that?
So where I stopped was there's the elevator thing where you're trying to get the ball.
Right.
and then you travel in the ball and arrive
Right.
at a new area, and that is where I stopped.
Okay, so that next area is the worst part.
Okay.
Because in that area, there's another thing that you ride up, which is like you're inside of this giant slug monster that you're slicing open so that you can use him to go up. And
Oh.
in that area, like, you know, like the ram enemy, there are
Yeah.
times where like they throw 2 rams at you and some of the spitter guys. Like, and again, you're supposed to run away from these guys. And this is my own fault. I didn't know that there was a run button. And so I walked away from a lot of these enemies.
Oh,
and so I took
no.
a lot of damage, which makes it way worse. Because at first I was like, I need to kill all of these guys. Because that's what you do in video games. You give me bad guys, I shoot them. And you're not supposed to shoot them. You're supposed to run away from them. So eventually I figured that out and it made it slightly easier. But the bigger problem in that section is it's way more confusing because it's multi-leveled and multi-roomed, not through elevators. Actually, there are some elevators on top of it. But it's very confusing to know where to go when and creating a map in your head of where to go. And you're trying to do that while running away from a bunch of dudes. And so that, I died a lot in that section, and it was not fun at all.
Yeah.
And then in the back section, there isn't, there is combat, but it's way easy. Because you do a couple of, like, boss battles against these automatrons. Where you're, like, they give you this grenade launcher, and you basically have to avoid their attack until they reload or overheat, and then you shoot them with the grenade launcher. It's extremely easy.
Okay.
But that section is much shorter and much more straightforward because you're just kind of walking from one area to the next and moving certain things from one, element to the next. But then the ending of the game is... I thought they were going to do like some kind of bait and switch, and then they didn't.
Partway through, you get infested with a parasite.
Right.
That is like slowly.
Let's not call it a parasite. Let's call it a human-sized demon that punctures your entire torso and slowly drains your health the rest of the game. This isn't like you don't get coronavirus. This is like a giant bat that rides on your back the rest of the game.
Yes, yeah. It is attempting to subsume you.
Yes.
To use a fun word.
And then eventually,
I feel like it's evocative of what this game is doing.
You use this like mechanical thing to pry it off of you, it reminded me a lot of the Dead Space mechanic when you have to stab yourself in the eye.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly 1-to-1 with that, but I got a similar sensation of ickiness doing it. And so then you're just like trying not to bleed out before you get to the end of the game. And then you get to the end of the game, and because like it's all a metaphor for like some kind of purgatory, hell, whatever, and you're trying to escape, and that's your motivating factor. That's at least my interpretation. But you're trying to escape this hellscape that you are in. You reach what you think is the finale of the game, where you come across these giant cathedrals, which are like really gorgeous in a gothic, horrible way. But like you also you get into this thing, and then this robot comes up and slices you to pieces and connects your consciousness to to 2 other bodies.
Yeah.
So there's a little puzzle where you're controlling 2 bodies at once. And then you go and you pick up your old corpse and you're carrying it to this like if anyone's, oh shit, what was the name of that movie with Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaacs in it? Annihilation. That like shimmer glimmer kind of thing. It looks sort of like that almost. Where like you don't know what it is, but you know that's where you're supposed to go. So you're carrying your body up there. Sure. And then right before you get there, the coronavirus bat comes back and kills you, and you turn into a fucking piece of fungi, and you just sit there for the rest of eternity. And then then the game ends.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was literally all meaningless what I just did.
Correct. And I think that's like what I took away from like the little slices and visual language that they would use to like give you information on the society, what built this place.
Okay.
Is that like they were probably, and this is me, I don't know, just spitballing. It felt like they were attempting to iterate on their own physiology to achieve some sort of like enlightenment,
perfect
analog.
Yeah.
And
The
somewhere
dwarves,
along
they
the
delved
way,
too deep.
yeah, they lost their humanity in the process and became like machines,
Right.
and therefore like eliminating the need for the enlightenment or the ability to achieve it. And so in pursuing it, they ruined their capability of achieving it. And so your character going through and attempting the same thing, it's going to be futile because there's no hope. There's no hope left.
And that's fine. And obviously there's a lot of abstract narrative and theming around it, but the issue I have with that interpretation is that isn't the finale. There's no self-discovery, there's no failure in like trying to achieve this. You just get beaten by the enemy that's been on you the whole time. And it's like that's where I feel a bit of a disconnect, because there's no like resolution to the character's attempt at resolving something.
Well,
it's
what
just
it is
like this
is
external force.
you accept the giant parasite monkey bat thing because it gives you the ability to do something you need to do. So you let it inhabit you so you can do that thing. And then so because you needed this thing to keep going, and the thing is the thing that stops you at the end, the implication there is that it was it was never possible.
Okay.
It's like, okay, no matter what you did, no matter what you tried, it was never going to be possible for you to accomplish your task, or
because that's the price you pay. Like you accepted this,
right,
negative presence to do the thing, and then once you were done with the negative presence, you got rid of it, but you can't. It comes back. And, okay, that tracks.
Or like instead of maybe something like along the lines of like, instead of accepting things the way they are, you destroyed yourself by trying to make things better, kind of a thing. Something
what a
like
great
that.
message.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a more eloquent meaning behind it. Clearly it didn't make its way into my brain when I played it.
Obviously, the developers had a message when they made it. Like they have an opinion, but it's this more so than any game that we've talked about today is a work of art. Because you and I can sit here and have philosophical conversations about our interpretation of what you're doing and why you're doing it, beyond just the visuals of that game, which are just absolutely otherworld incredible.
Yeah.
Unappealing, sure, but could not have been done better for the style that they're attempting. So that part of it is awesome. And I am not a person that typically enjoys... That's not true. I don't enjoy certain kinds of art because they don't speak to me personally. Like actual physical art, sculpture, and paintings.
That's true of everybody.
Yeah. But because the point being of like, I don't like that kind of conversation about art because that's just not what I like. But that isn't true because I love conversations about interactive art in this way.
Yeah. Talking
about games and movies and books and all of those other works of, forms of art. So that's how this game speaks to me and why I can say that I truly, truly appreciate and respect this game, even though like I didn't like a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't have a 2022 Game of the Year list because I've only played like 11 games that came out last year. I imagine that once I get to a point where I can like call my list done, that Scorn would be on that list in some way, shape, or form because of its thought-provoking nature. And so many games don't attempt that, much less actually succeed in making me think about it. It's just a bummer. Like, the biggest thing is that middle chunk with the combat being such a hard hill to climb to get past. And then even, take whatever interpretation you want of the ending. You can make an ending unsatisfying on purpose, but that's a hard line to toe because it's still unsatisfying. And to me, it wasn't as unsatisfying in a thought-provoking way. It was more unsatisfying in a that's it way. Like, and I'm not trying to rewrite the game because it would totally change what they're going for here, but if there would have been something more about what specifically this character is trying to do or where they're trying to go or how they're trying to achieve something, and they have some sort of self-actualizing realization or they fail or some other force prevents them from doing it. It was specifically the fact that like it almost felt like the subplot ends up being the ending. Does that make sense? Where like your character's trying to do X and they used A to accomplish X, but then when the game ends, X didn't even really matter. It was all about A the whole time. And that just felt a little disconnected and a little clunky and unsatisfying to me.
Yeah. And I guess like, I don't know, if we're going to roll with my interpretation of the meaning, I think that structure makes a lot of sense. But to your point, that doesn't necessarily, while it can make sense as art, it doesn't necessarily make it satisfying as a video game.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Medium.
Yeah.
Which, again, if that's not what they're going for, then that's not what they're going for, and they accomplished it.
Right. But that doesn't like, that's the part of games as art that gets tricky. Yeah. Because people do this with physical art all the time of like, its value is what you interpret it to be. Where like, you can't criticize it because it's art. Where that like it being a video game makes it different than a painting, where it doesn't just have value based upon your interpretation. There are mechanics and interactivity, like the gunplay, for example, is objectively poor, regardless of whether or not they did it on purpose or as part of some bigger message. It's a video game. You're forcing me to interact with it in this way. And it was poorly done. You're not forced to interact with a painting in a particular way, right? You're making me do this in the video game, and that was bad. I don't like it. It was bad. That's my highfalutin criticism for Scorn. No, but in all seriousness, like I love talking about games like this because it's so much more interesting. Like I like talking.
6.
yeah, that's a perfect correlation because like I love talking about like Hi-Fi Rush and stuff that like games that are going for something that's interesting. Love talking about that stuff too. Far Cry 6 is a perfect correlation because Far Cry 6 is going for nothing. It has zero ambition, and that can be totally fine. There are many games that I like. Dynasty Warriors 4 is a perfect example.
Hell yeah.
I love that game to death. Zero ambition in that game. Zero innovation in that game. It's just mindless fun.
What about Nobunaga's ambition?
What about Cow Cow? What about the Wu
mic
Clan?
Drop. Fucking mic drop.
So that's Scorn. I love talking about games like that. I'm glad that I finished it. I'm glad that I overcame that section because boy, I didn't want to. But I'm glad that I did. Despite the ending not feeling good to me, I'm glad that I at least saw it so that I can have an opinion and feelings on it. So
sure.
All right, man. What else you got? We got a lot more on this list yet.
Oh yeah, let's run down real quick. The next two,
Dead Space. Nobody cares about that.
Yeah, the next two have been out for a little while, so they're not like huge to hit on. But The Long Dark is a survival game set up in the Arctic, I think, or it's like northern Canada or something. I'm not quite sure. It's very cold all the time, and the daylight cycle's weird, so it must be really far north. So it's a survival game set in those circumstances. It has a really cool like painterly art style where it's 3D models. It's a first person game, but the models are like almost painted in a way, and it's just a cool design. I like it. Visual style. And Wintermute specifically is the storyline, and I think there are 5 chapters, or there's 4 chapters, and the 5th is supposed to come out this year to finish it. I played the first couple of chapters. It's a good tutorialization of the systems. I'll say that, because otherwise jumping in not knowing, it can be really complicated. Like there's weight, there's temperature, there's wind chill that affects the temperature, there's like each piece of clothing, depending on its condition, that can be repaired or damaged, has like different, like it resists the wind versus cold and wet and stuff like that. So it gets granular in all of those types of ways. You have your hunger and your thirst and stuff, but most important being your temperature, because it is so cold. And so like when you get like a good set of gear put together where you can step outside when the sun is high, and not be losing your temperature gauge, that feels really good, because like I can actually explore and not worry for a little bit about my temperature. But then the weather starts to pick up and the wind comes in, or you crest a hill and the wind is coming up off the side of the hill, like that wind chill affects your temperature a little bit. So like there are a lot of considerations there. That also plays into like starting a fire. Like if you're going to start a fire, you shouldn't do it in a place where there's wind, because it could affect your chance of starting it. You should do it at a sheltered location, the leeward side of a hill or something. So it has a lot of really cool systems.
I did not turn those mods on in my last playthrough of Skyrim, so I don't think that I would like this game.
Yeah, for sure. It's this game is totally my shit. I will say the one thing I don't like is that I wish there was some sort of like a building aspect to it, because that's the thing that I really, really like. Like I would like to, instead of like subsisting on the things that I can find and trying to like eke out an existence for as long as possible, I also like to do that and construct things. It's the difference between surviving and thriving. Like I like to create things in my survival games, so there's none of that, and that's where the storyline helps propel me a little bit. The writing is a little it's slow. The line delivery, like people are really chewing the scenery, and there's a lot of dialogue, and it's just like standing in front of a person talking to them. A character that I met in the second chapter, he sounded really familiar, and he gets injured and he starts like making noises, and I'm like, is that David Hayter? Is that Solid Snake? I was like, is this dude doing a Solid Snake impression? And then I listened to it again. He made like another pained noise, and I was like, yo, that's like that's Solid Snake. And sure enough, it's actually David Hayter that they got. They also got Jennifer Hale for a character in the first episode or the first chapter. So like they have some big name voice actors in there. The writing's not bad. It's just it's slow, and they're slow in delivering it. And also there's always the sense of tension, because meters are always draining in a survival game, and so to like stand still for like 10 minutes talking to a character feels so wrong.
Sure.
On a lot of levels, you're like, I need to be doing.
You get a
I
game
doing
over
stuff
in the middle of the conversation.
And I think they pause all that stuff while you're talking.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. But that breaks your immersion.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about it the whole time. It's like, yeah, dude, I gotta get the spear to fight the bear. It's fine. Okay, I understand the mission. I gotta fucking go, bro. Like my life is on the line, man. So like, I don't know. It's a very good game. It's a very good survival game. I would highly recommend it to folks who either maybe don't know about it or don't realize there is a story component to it. If you're not comfortable just jumping into something new, this has been a good tutorial so far. So that's The Long Dark. And then my buddy Cody and I have been playing Satisfactory. We started up a new world, and I mean that's another one of my
go-tos.
It's a Kyle game through and through. It's a big open world crafting factory game where you get to find resources. It's a lot of he and I are generating spreadsheets to find like the perfect ratio of ore extraction to processing to product production, and like it's just I fucking love it. I love it. It's just just give me more of it. So he and I are playing that again because we spent a ton of time building up this massive factory that looked amazing, and then we just like fell off of it for a little bit. And now we're coming back into it, and we're like, okay, what are some ways in which we can do this better this time? Mm-hmm. Some different ways we can approach the different, like, supply chain management issues and stuff like that we can approach differently. So we're trying some different stuff out, and that's been a lot of fun. So Satisfactory continues to be great. The last game on my list, the most well, all right, I'll skip the other small one. It's fine. The last one on my list, the most important to me personally, the Dead Space remake.
More important than Hi-Fi Rush. More important than Scorn.
Correct. Yes.
That's fair.
Duh.
Hi-Fi Rush is very good. It's not Dead Space.
Yeah, Dead Space is one of my favorite games of all time.
Same.
It's the first game I ever platinumed on PlayStation. Fuck, I love that game. That game is just tremendous. It's right up there for me with Resident Evil 4. Top 5 games of all time. And the remake, A, it's gorgeous. B, the character redesign of Isaac is the worst part about it. They turned him from average, everyday, blue-collar Joe, like ship's engineer mechanic guy, to Silicon Valley investor schmoozy fuck. He looks like he's from SoCal. Like, fuck this guy completely. I'm sorry if we have listeners from SoCal. I love you. You're great. Stick around. But y'all know who I'm talking about. Like, he's got like the slicked back blondish hair, chiseled features. It just feels wrong. It feels so wrong. He's like ship's engineer and mechanic.
Right.
Look, anybody can work these kinds of jobs. It was nice to have a main character who just looked like a dude.
Sure.
He wasn't like jacked.
He wasn't
and
a
didn't have
model.
a 6-pack. Yeah, he was just like a competent guy who knows his shit, who's thrown into a horrible
Middle-aged.
situation and adapts. Yeah,
Right.
and like the psychological toll that has on him in subsequent entries in the franchise makes sense.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, like this dude's not equipped for this stuff. And now it's like just he looks like video game pro tag. I hate it so much.
That sucks.
Yeah, but he has the helmet on almost all the time, so I just ignore it. It's fine.
Does that influence? Because I know they added voice acting, which did not exist in the first one. Is the characterization different?
That's not like that. I will say there's a
He's not like, yo, we should make an app for this.
no. He's not drinking boba tea.
Sorry, man, I got an investor meeting.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I don't think this is in the original. There's a text log that you get at the beginning on the ship that you the ship that you arrive in, that you crash in. And it talks about his background and like his mom and dad, and provides like his mom was into unitology. She got like swept up in the cult of unitology, and his dad was like a famous ship architect and other stuff like that. And so I'm like, oh, so he kind of was a rich kid? Are they saying he was a rich
baby
kid? A rich kid with like daddy and mommy issues and stuff? So I feel like they're trying to lay some of the groundwork there for some of the psychological issues that he has. But structurally, so the most important things, right? Like moment to moment, how is it? How does it compare? I don't know if it's my memory betraying me or if this is intentional and it's a real thing. I feel like the enemies are absorbing hits more. I'm playing on hard.
Well, that seems like it could be a reason.
Yeah, but it's like, I feel like in the original, you could shoot an enemy and they wouldn't just keep coming at you as if nothing was happening.
Yeah.
Like, they just keep moving towards you. So I'm taking a lot of hits that I feel like I would not have been taking in the original game. Because like I could largely play the original game and not take very many hits. Like the occasional thing sneaks through or whatever because they throw you into some pretty crazy combat scenarios. But like I had it down and I could play it on the hardest difficulty and it wasn't that big of a deal. In this, something about it is I think they made the enemies react a little less. Like there's like a little less knockback on some of the
Do you need to be using
stuff.
stasis more?
I think that's part of what it is. I think they want you to experiment with kinesis and stasis a lot more. And so I've been doing that, and that's been fun. Because in the original, I didn't really have to use that stuff as much. So here, I feel like I'm really sparing my shots.
Yeah.
Every enemy, I'm cutting off an arm so I can take its blade and shoot it back at something. Okay. So I am engaging with all of the breadth of the combat more. So I think like that's probably a net positive, but it for me, it's a net negative because I feel like I have less control over the combat situation and how I'm playing it. I feel like, I'm struggling a little bit more.
Well,
which is, it's good and bad, right? It's about what you're looking for. And for me, I like playing these games because it makes me feel like I have a mastery over a tense situation, and I haven't been quite feeling that. And maybe that'll change as I get more access to weapons and stuff. Like I just got the line. I actually have a pretty decent range of weapons. It's just the drip feed of ammo has been very slow. And I will say, like, this is probably the only negative adjacent thing aside from the Isaac thing I'll talk about with the game.
But it's worth saying, like, this is impossible to do. But like, what it like, try to separate your love and mastery of the first game. And if you were playing this with no context, would you feel that way? Like, does the combat feel bad because of how it's different, or is it just different and you just don't like it as much?
It's just different, and I don't like it nearly as much. I feel like I would rather be playing the original in terms of the moment-to-moment combat stuff. However, they have done a lot of quality of life things, and they've drastically changed the structure of the game.
Yeah.
And this is a huge criticism I had of Callisto Protocol. I think I talked about it on last episode, was you never get a sense of the space you're in and what you're moving through. It feels contextless.
Right.
Now, in this version of the game, they open up, like, you used to use the tram to travel to the different chapters and different areas in the original, but it was linear. You didn't just get free movement through the space. Now, at any time, you can hop on the tram and go to one of the areas you've unlocked. And, like, instead of, in the original game, you would use, power nodes to unlock doors that would have extra loot in them and stuff.
Yeah.
Here, they've implemented a security clearance level.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like a Metroidvania aspect where you're going back to areas you've already been to
get behind a level 2 door.
Exactly. So it encourages you to continue to move through the ship and get a better sense of space. There are ways to move between areas without the tram occasionally, which is kind of neat. There's a way to get from like the hangar bay area to medical without using the tram.
Is that like
it feels like you have like the run of the ship, and that's
really cool.
Do you use the
zero grav to do that?
So there are times where you're going out in limited capacity, but you're not actually going out and all the way around the ship so far.
Okay.
Maybe they'll open that up. I'm not sure. It seems like they kind of gate that a little bit, but like, because they totally changed the cannon, the ADS cannon sequence. It's not a turret sequence anymore.
Right. Yeah,
you're going down. That. Yeah, you're going down like a trench run. Some enemies are popping out, and you're syncing up your the cannons with your aiming thing, and you just have to destroy a few incoming asteroids with it, and then it locks in and it calibrates, and you move on to the next one, do the next thing. So like they're shaking up some of the minigame stuff in cool ways as well.
Well, that turret sequence was awful, so I'm sure sure based on feedback they knew they needed to address that.
Totally. And like it's a lot of small changes like that so far, where it's like, this is just a clever modernization of the formula and the structure. A lot of the lines are the same. A lot of the delivery is pretty much the same as well on a lot of things. Because you're there to track down your girlfriend, Nicole, and because you got a cryptic message from her, and so you're coming to like check out the ship. Potentially, yes. And so you're trying to find out what's going on with her, and instead of, because the game's no longer linear. Well, it's linear to a degree, but you have full run of the ship. There are side quests. So like one of the side quests is like go to all these areas and find all these high ranking personnel rigs so you can craft a really high level security clearance thing to access master security clearance rooms with really good loot. And then the Nicole storyline is like a side quest. So you're like, because your job is there to like recover the Ishimura the ship itself and restore power and find out what went on, that's your main quest. But really Isaac's there to find out what went on with Nicole. So on the side, as he's doing those main things, you have side quest objectives that you can kind of tackle as you unlock these new areas in any order you want.
Nice.
Where you're like, oh, I heard she was down in medical at one point.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go look for her in medical, see if there's like a recording of her, do a little bit of investigating in the area, unlock like a secret room behind a thing. And there's another place where she was and was discovering more about like the effects of the marker on people and stuff like that. So there's some really cool stuff there around how they're telling the Nicole side story now, which I think is structurally really interesting.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, like totally unexpected too.
Yeah.
Like that's they've done a lot of work. And I'm largely, I mean, aside from the combat stuff, like I said, it still feels really good to play, and I think it's all intentional in service of having a more rounded out experience for players. And also I'm playing on hard. It's really, really good. I think, like, depending on what I'm looking for from a Dead Space experience, I could see myself playing this version over the old version.
Interesting.
Occasionally. Yeah. Like, it's really cool. And then I also heard that there's, like, a secret ending, because there's a new game plus in this, where if you beat it again, you get a secret ending. And, like, I'm really interested in seeing where they take that or what they do there, because hopefully that sets up a new entry.
100%. Like, that's the only reason they did this, was to gauge interest in the new entries in the series after the shit show that was Dead Space 3. So yeah, I mean, that's absolutely, I'm sure what the secret ending does is set up something to take them for, if it's a reimagining of Dead Space 2 or taking it in a completely different direction, I don't know.
Right. There's a famous treasure item in the first Dead Space called Pang.
Yep.
P-E-N-G. It's like a model lady or something from an ad on a poster you see, and it's like a figurine of her, and it sells for a bunch of credits, and you can get it in the hangar bay. In this, where Pang is in the original, there's a text log, and the text log is like, I finally found it, it's mine, blah, 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 blah. I've hidden it where, da-da-da. So now there's like a side secret thing.
Yeah.
To find the Pang treasure in a new location, and it's just a fun nod to like people who know from the first game,
because it's right in the beginning of the game, right?
Yeah, you can see it at the beginning, but you don't have the kinesis module, so you can't get it. Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I'm definitely gonna play it. It was more just a matter of timing for me of trying to get it and start it before the podcast. Yeah. I'm not sure if it'll be a February thing or if I'll wait. With Atomic Heart coming out in February, that might scratch the like kind of spooky atmospheric game. And obviously playing through the Quarry and stuff, I can only handle one scary game at a time, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So I'll get to Dead Space for sure eventually. I'm so relieved that this one turned out well after what happened with Callisto Protocol.
Yeah, I needed this to be a big hit, and I feel really good about it so far.
Because, I mean, if it wasn't good, it's not like it ruins the original game, which, by any means, but to have a new updated version of it that is, it honors the original, but it's different enough that it feels like a new experience. Like, it's not Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're not totally from the ground up, but it's got enough stuff where it doesn't just feel like a graphical upgrade. I think it hits that sweet spot of like a remaster. So
it's really justified its existence really well.
Sure. Yeah. Dope. So I wanted to talk some TV stuff. We're running so long that I don't really want to do that anymore.
You know what? It's fine. It's fine. Who cares?
Okay, you're right.
People got time.
You're right.
People love long shit.
So let me mention House of the Dragon really quickly, and I only bring this up because I was such a fan of Game of Thrones. Well, the first 5 seasons. And then I know you fell off super hard on that show, and I very gently, politely ribbed you about it over the course of the original podcast, with no mean intent behind the jokes that I would make in a brotherly way.
Gently ribbed you over the course of years.
So I only bring it up because with House of the Dragon, after the way that Game of Thrones ended, I just had no interest in this show, and I knew eventually I would watch it. We didn't have HBO Max, and we totally bought it to watch House of the Dragon. Like, we're definitely paying for HBO Max. and are definitely not password sharing at all. So we got HBO Max, and we're like, you know what? We've got it. We should check it out. And so we watched the first 2 episodes, and something happened in the first episode, which like I don't want to spoil because it's kind of like needs some trigger warnings around as well. But there's stuff with like childbirth that is very upsetting that my wife did not have a good time with. She had a really rough time with it, where after we watched the first 2 episodes and we were done for the night, I just wasn't into the show. Like, I wasn't into the characters. The story wasn't compelling to me. And I was just like, I don't care. I'll keep watching it because people generally seemed to like it. So I'll watch another couple episodes. So I brought it up to Kelly. And she was like, no. After that first episode, like, I was done. There's no way. I just do not want to ever think about it ever again. So we're done with that show. And that sucks because, like, I was talking to a buddy of mine who had seen it, obviously, and he was like, yeah, it starts slow. I guess there's, like, a jump forward in time in the show. And he's like, after that happens in, you know, halfway or a third through the season, he's like, that's when it gets really good, which I find interesting. And, like, I'm kind of curious to see how that works. But I'm not going to watch it by myself. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a couple more hours, whatever. The biggest thing is I'd have to watch it by myself. And I just know I'm not going to do that. So it's a bummer. I really like Matt Smith's character. He plays kind of the primary antagonist. And I described him as a loser Reddit troll who thinks he's a king. And that character is very fun because, like, he's like Joffrey, where he's just so hateable, but Joffrey just gets away with all his shit because he's the little asshole prince. Right. And Matt Smith's character, he just fails. Like, he tries to, like, be annoying and be a badass, but he loses over and over and over, and he keeps getting called out for it. And so I like that as sort of like a mirror to Reddit troll culture and, like, just internet culture in general of these people who just hate. Well, I was about to say, you know, these people who hate everything and how annoying they are when my podcast is
assholes who think they can have a podcast. Fucking weirdos.
But you know what I mean? Like that part of it I thought was very fun. Yeah, write in if you agree, Adam. No, but I like his character, but that's not enough for me to keep going. The other one I to mention, because I know you haven't seen it as well, is The Last of Us, which I also bring up because we've talked ad nauseum about the show and your just complete disinterest because of how amazing the story is in the first game, and like 100% on board with that. I think what's interesting with the show, at the time of recording, we have 3 episodes out. What's interesting about the show is the first 2 episodes in particular are like so, in many ways, exactly like the game. The scene, I mean, spoilers for The Last of Us show if you're a weirdo who hasn't played the game, because it's the same. But the opening, like the prologue of the game, where it's Joel with his daughter and they're trying to run away as the outbreak is happening. From the moment they like leave their house and hop in their truck, it is, I don't want to say literally because I haven't shot by shot, but it feels like it's literally exactly the same as it plays out in the game, where they, you know, they're driving through the street. There's the family on the side of the road who are broken down, and he wants to stop. He's like, no, keep driving. They drive past the house that's on fire. Once they get into the town, that's where all the shit happens. And then it starts to differentiate a little bit, and because it's a TV show, so they're extending some scenes a little bit. But that moment was so awesome as a lover of the game to see that translated to live action and how clearly they wanted to do the same thing was just very cool. Then episode 3 is an extreme departure from the setup of the game, because that focuses on Bill, and I don't want to spoil that part of the show for folks that haven't seen it, but it is super different than what happens in the game. And I love that in a totally different way, because then it makes the show, because previously the show in a lot of ways have felt like it's cool to see the game I love in real life. And that's awesome. In the episode 3, it was like, oh shit, this thing has value on its own because it's telling a different kind of story, just in the same universe with the same characters and a lot of the similarities. And so they've diverged in a way that I really appreciate. And in particular, that third episode is so phenomenally done as a standalone episode. Take it apart from any larger narrative. As a standalone episode, it is such compelling television that, like, if you could separate it from being The Last of Us and just watch that episode, you would love it because it is absolutely incredible. Obviously, it is part of the larger narrative, right? And they get back to the normal story and the progression of what they're trying to do with the Fireflies and shit. But, like, that, I remember watching that episode and being blown away by the audacity in a way of, like, to make it so different, but also an appreciation of them going for it and just not, it wasn't just a lazy adaptation of an incredible video game story, but it's them trying to actually make a compelling television show out of this, video game setup. So I understand your disinterest based upon how you look at that kind of stuff, and we've talked we just disagree on that sort of thing. But I just really encourage you to give it a shot at some point. Maybe when it's all out there and you get access to HBO or whatever. Just because it's, as a television show, they're able to do things that the video game can't because of the medium that it's in. And that's really, really cool. One of the things that is odd in the show, they got rid of the spores as a, like, transmission mechanism for the fungus, which makes sense because they don't want their actors to be wearing masks all the time, which is
the whole time.
Ironic because Pedro Pascal plays the Mandalorian, where he wears a mask for 99% of the show. But
maybe it's for him. He didn't want to be.
He didn't want to do another one. But, like, that's absolutely the reason they did that. And so, like, it's not that big of a deal. But instead, the transmission is just, like, peer to peer through it makes it feel a little more typical zombie because you have to get bitten. You have to get, the infection spread in that way. So it feels a little bit more zombie than the games do, which is a little disappointing. But the other big change, which I think is cool, is, and maybe this is how they tried to compensate to change it from a typical zombie setup, is that the fungus can communicate with itself. So, like, the runners have the fungus tendrils around their arms and their fingers that, like, they can react or they can sense you and send a signal to other runners to, like, be like, yo, they're here, come here. And so they play with that in some fun ways, which is, like, super different than how the game worked. But I thought, like, an interesting approach. And the clickers are dope. Like, they, again, spoilers for the show, but not for the game, they do the big setup where they're in the museum, like in the game, which is your first big interaction with the clickers, where they just throw, like, 3 of them, and they have, like, that really tense kind of back and forth with limited weaponry and trying to navigate it. And holy shit, it was so much like the game where you're just, like, running in circles, like, trying to get an angle. You've only got 2 shots in your revolver, so you need to, like, get far enough away to line up the headshot. Like, they play with that really, really well. That really reminded me of the experience, but in a different medium, which was really cool. So I have extremely, extremely good things to say about that show, both as a video game adaptation and as a standalone piece of, media. It's dope. Definitely recommended for those that want to pay for HBO Max or maybe get it in a different way.
I have watched the show.
Dude, you're the biggest. You are the biggest asshole.
I've been waiting for this moment. Oh, it's so good.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Shea It's Everything podcast. We will not be back for an episode 3. Dude, you're such... that... Like, huge props. That's hilarious. But also, what the hell?
I have to know. I have to know.
So then what do you think, dude?
I love the source material too much. I have to know. I think this show's terrific for people who have not played the game.
Okay.
I think as it stands on its own as a good television show, I much prefer everything that the game does to what the show's doing.
In what way? Like, what do you mean?
I think that the spore transmission to
Yeah.
me is a lot more interesting.
100% agree.
The one organism idea is cool, and it makes me kind of wish the game traded on that a little bit. But the lack of spore, I feel like
It removes a lot of the danger.
It sucks a lot of the threat out of the world. For me, I think the stuff that they did with Bill in episode 3, I was totally on board with it until the end. And they they fell into a trope with the end that like the first, like 95% of the episode is counter to that trope, and then they fall into it at the end. And I was really kind of annoyed by that. And also because I think there was, the reason I was enjoying the third episode so much is because Bill is such an underdeveloped character in the game, and I always found him to be very interesting.
Yeah.
But like the mystery of wondering more about him made him more interesting. I think because he feels like a real, in the game, he feels like a real person you are experiencing for the slice of time, not just because he functionally is a MacGuffin. In the game,
and you don't need to know a bunch of this other stuff because he's a narrative device to push the plot forward, and he's an interesting, compelling character because like it's not relevant for you to know anything else about him. That's where the medium matters, because this is a television show. It's not a video game. You need to develop the character in order for you to be invested in what's happening.
I thought them exploring that in this episode was really good, and it made me excited for where things could go next.
Right.
And I was looking forward to more development there, and I don't know that we're necessarily gonna get that, which is a bummer, because in the game I feel like it's like, we leave Bill, and it's kind of like a, it's not a very happy goodbye kind of thing. It's like a fuck you, hope I never see you again kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then it makes you kind of wonder. Like, while I was playing the second game, I had like a couple moments where I was like, I wonder what Bill's up to. Like, I wonder what is he still around out there somewhere? And this being a television show, I feel like there's an opportunity to explore that a little bit more. And so I don't think we're going to get that, and that makes me sad.
And I agree, because the door is very clearly closed on him having a further involvement in like this narrative, the Joel and Ellie narrative. But again, it's like the way they did this doesn't change anything about the games. Like that Bill still exists, and that like character that you invented in your head and wondering what he's up to and how him and Joel would interact if they met again, that all still exists. It's like an Elseworlds multiverse, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but I hate that shit. I hate like,
but it isn't literally
of things.
It isn't literally that. It isn't literally the multiverse.
No, but the reason I don't like multiverses is because of conflicting versions of things. I like there to be some bounds to my fiction. Like, I hate all these different Spider-Men, like all the different people playing Spider-Man. Like, I want a Spider-Man, a version of that character that I can classify and pack away into the recesses of my mind and understand it and move on to the next thing. Like, there are all these different versions, and it's just, this has been going on in comics since its inception as a medium, and I understand that, but like,
part of that is
despise that.
Part of it is, comics is such a good example because they make those versions interact a lot, and they make the stories converge a lot. This is different. Like, this goes way back to when we were talking about God of War, when God of War 2018 came out, and you had a very similar reaction to that game because you loved the originals so much, and this was so different. It was such a different character. It was such a different type of game that it turned you off. And like,
yeah, but this is at least the God of War is at least a narrative continuation of the same Kratos.
Yeah, it's the same character. That's fair. Yeah.
like that's why I generally have negative feelings towards reboots, because they
But that's
are,
not what this is.
It muddies. It kind of is. It kind of is.
No, it isn't.
It muddies the narrative waters in my head. It's a personal thing for me. It muddies the narrative waters in my head with how I classify and store information on fictional things that I care about. And it's just a personal pet peeve of mine, because it makes my brain operate in a way that it doesn't like, for whatever reason. So
yes.
it mentally feels bad when that stuff happens. And so having this other version of Joel and Ellie exist, you say it doesn't affect the fact that the original thing it does, because now I go back and I play the original thing and I go, oh yeah, so and so did it this way and they changed that, I didn't really like that. And now instead of thinking about the source material, I'm thinking about the new stuff that they made. And that's life. It's fine. It's not like my life is over.
But you can't. But that is 100% in your control. Like that specific example, you can't blame the show for doing that. Like that's in your control to focus on how you didn't like the new one better when you're playing the old one.
Yeah, I'm not blaming the show. Like I said, I think like for people who haven't experienced the game and like coming to this fresh, I think it stands on its own as like a really nice piece of entertainment and fiction.
Yeah, well, I have played the game. It's one of my favorite games ever made, and I still love the hell out of this show and appreciate it for being something different and similar, and I like that convergence. I like that watching the show, I know I can now be surprised, which after the first 2 episodes, I didn't think that I would really be surprised, and I really appreciate that. That makes it exciting for me as a viewer, compared to my wife who's watching it, who knows the general broad strokes of the first game, but isn't intimately familiar with the story. So she's watching this like it's all net new and is asking me like, is that the same as it was in the game? Like after the 3rd episode, she was like, I don't remember you telling me about that kind of thing. And I was like, that's because it wasn't there. And that to me is fun. That's what makes this engaging. If it was the same thing exactly, there would be no purpose. Like with Dead Space. If they just enhance the graphics, what would be the point? Other than you get to play a game that looks like you remember it looking like. The fact that they modernize things, they change some things. And again, some of them you prefer and some of them you don't. But there is value in it existing, and not just for, like, you wouldn't only recommend Dead Space to someone who never played the original, right? And that's how I view this. But the show is more different than the 2 Dead Space games are.
Correct.
But yeah.
And I don't want to get too hung up on the way my brain works. I have other issues with the Joel and Ellie portrayals by the actors.
Complete agreement there. I am very underwhelmed.
Lacking in all subtlety that and maybe this is, they accentuated those performance captures in like the original Last of Us, but no, they didn't, because they went back in the Part 1 remake. They were able to encapsulate all of their facial capture, and that was like what really sold it for me. I just think like there is part of it is a constriction's not the right word. A constraint of the medium, in that they have a time limit on this stuff. They can't let shots linger the same way that a game can, because it's just paced differently. It's a different medium. But part of what makes The Last of Us work is the extra half second the camera lingers on Joel's face after Ellie says something or does something. Right. And you get a whole world of information in that half a second. And we're not getting any of that shit in the show. Like, it feels like his portrayal of Joel, the way they're editing it and cutting it and filming it, whatever, his portrayal of Joel is, I'm in a bad mood and I'm mad about being in a bad mood and doing this thing with this kid. And we're starting to see a little bit of give on that now, but like from the jump in the game, you see all the history written on his face in every moment. And it feels like in the game, it is fully inhabited every moment of every second of the cutscenes, at least, because obviously the in-game stuff isn't animated the same way. But in the show, it feels like they're picking moments in which to let
Yes.
that inhabit the character, and that's far less consistent and interesting to me. And that's just a nitpicky actor thing.
I don't think
But-
it's a nitpick. I 100% agree. And even because I talked to Kelly about this specifically, because she watched me play the entirety of the second game, but she never watched me play the first. She just knows the general story. And so as she's asking me questions, and she even commented of like, this feels softer than I remembered their relationship being, and the way you described it, the way they are in the beginning of part 2. Because it is like in the very beginning and the stuff with Tess, he felt more distant, but you don't see the depth of the reasoning behind that
Right.
distance. It's more just like he's annoyed than any like deeper meaning. But once Tess, exits the picture in the show, it feels he's like way more accepting and fatherly of her immediately. And like, he's kind of harsher, like, but it's like, I don't know. I don't, in the game, my memory at least is like, even still, he wants nothing. He is, he refuses to, she's a backpack that he has to deliver.
He doesn't look at her.
Yeah, he's unwilling.
In the game,
yeah.
like literally his eyes go to the side.
Right.
Like he literally won't look at her. And like if he does, it's a quick side glance.
And
then
it's
he
like
looks
because he knows the path. Like he knows that if he allows her into his life, how things are going to end, because he's already experienced that. It's that the depth of loss that they don't in the game. It just feels like he's just, or in the show rather, it just feels like he's a little bit like a taskmaster where he's annoyed by her, and less that like I can't go there is how it is in the games.
And part of it as well is the Ellie in the show is nowhere near as likable as the Ellie in the game.
Agree. Yeah.
She's just not something about her portrayal or the writing or shooting, again, whatever it is. So something about it that you just don't connect with her on as much of a human level. I'm not quite sure what that is.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that she looks like an alien. I don't know.
No,
sorry, that's really mean, but like honestly, kind of, yeah. Like her face doesn't emote to the same degree, and I think that's a part of it.
She was really good in Game of Thrones, ironically.
I didn't see her in that, so I don't know.
She was really good in it, and funny because obviously Pedro Pascal was in Game of Thrones too, and Pedro Pascal is like one of my favorite modern actors, and I think that he is doing a good job in this. I don't mean to say that like I think his acting is bad. I am not finding Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie, I'm not finding her to be that compelling. And especially like, again, their interactivity. To be fair, we're 3 episodes in, and they're hardly in the third episode.
Was largely none of that.
But like, I think that Pedro Pascal is like doing fine. The woman that played Tess, I thought, was really, really good, and she gave that layered relationship with Ellie of like, this is a child. I'm an adult. I should be protecting this child, but also I'm a selfish, bad person. And that dichotomy of those things. And then
you're giving me layers. You're working, baby.
Like an onion. And then Nick Offerman, and then the guy that plays Frank in the 3rd episode, I thought both of them were just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I want more of that bill.
Right.
And that makes me sad.
It is a shame. Yeah. I guess I didn't add this to the news, but it's worth mentioning. They've already announced season 2. And when that happened, I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I wonder what they're going to do. Are they just going to stretch the game out into 2 or in some way, or do some sort of additional story after the ending of the first game? But Neil Druckmann was like super explicit. No, this is The Last of Us Part 2. We're doing that as the second story. And so it's possible that they change something about it, because timing-wise, they would have to, unless they recast Ellie, because it's been years in between the first game and the second game. They can't use the same actress, because, I mean, like, the story of Part 2 doesn't work if Ellie is, like, 15.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, like, a child like that, it just... In my opinion,
I agree.
A child like that can't feel the emotions that Ellie feels in Part 2. They can't do the things that Ellie does in Part 2. And so that, especially on a TV show where you have 10 hours to tell a story instead of 25 in a game, to get a character there, I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah.
I am interested in I know, and obviously you love the story in part 2, and I certainly didn't, but I am excited for part 2 in a different medium to potentially like change my mind. Or not, maybe that's not true, because it wouldn't change how I feel about the game, but like a different approach to the story I might enjoy. I guess I should frame it that way. So anyway, I thought that was interesting and kind of surprising that they would just announce that it's going to be part 2 already. And obviously they had that planned from the get-go. And I'm sure they had a high level of confidence that this would be successful to justify season 2. But I'm a little bummed because that makes it feel a little bit like, are we only going to get 2 seasons of this? Because if you're just jumping right to the second thing, like, where do you go from there?
Look, if modern TV is anything to go by, there will be 2 seasons with the main cast, and then it'll be a bunch of offshoots, like The Walking Dead has all those offshoot shows or whatever.
Well, but that's not.
It'll be a bunch of that
normal.
stuff.
That's not normal to do that.
Yeah, I feel every show that does well, like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon,
but
that's an offshoot show.
It isn't an offshoot. It takes place hundreds of years earlier.
But it's an offshoot because it's not part of the book's source material kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, it is. It's referenced.
And it doesn't follow it's obviously not the same characters because it's, jumping ahead in the timeline and all that other kind of stuff.
Well, but that's exactly the point it's unrelated. Like,
right. But it's trading on the name, the cachet that the original show.
I have a hard time
generated.
imagining that would be the route, given that Neil Druckmann is leading, like he's executive producing the show. Because if you do that, then this just becomes a zombie show, which isn't what The Last of Us is about. The Last of Us, it's a Joel and Ellie story, and then it's an Ellie story. You can't just do a Last of Us show that doesn't have any of the same characters in it, because then it is just
episode
The Walking
3
Dead.
proved. Episode 3 proved they're willing to make it not just the Joel and Ellie show. Episode 3 proves that they can. They can weave in characters you're familiar with occasionally, but then trade on these, well-written, well-developed relationships and tension and stress and stuff that develops out of those relationships.
That's fair, but that was one episode.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying. I don't see where they go past part 2. It would be weird if they were to try and keep the same characters.
Oh,
I could see them like.
That's my exact point. Like, you can't. I mean, and Neil Druckmann even came out. He's like, we might make a part 3 if we come up with a story. And I'm like, how would you come up with a story, dude? Like, what do you do after the ending of part 2? You can't do it with the same characters.
Well, no, I mean,
I guess it could be where
Abby ended up.
Yeah, it could be Abby and Lev. Yep. I guess
they were. Yeah, at the.
I don't want to fucking play that game.
At the end, they show the title screen changes to be that sailboat outside of that what's supposed to be a Firefly safe house on the coast. So clearly they made it there. So I think there's a thing there. There's the settlement. I can't remember the name of the town, but there's still Ellie is still there. She's still alive and battered and beaten.
Done though.
Look, people live. People got more stories. You know what I mean?
But not in this context.
There's still life there.
But like, it doesn't matter. That's a whole other podcast where we could theorize about
that's
that.
True.
It's
more 2.5 hours in.
Yeah, exactly. It's more that I was surprised that they would do part 2 immediately, because exactly to your point, I don't see how you can make a part 3 related to the same story. You would have to do a bunch of new characters, or at least a majority new characters, and that would feel too different.
Maybe they spend some time, or they've had a plan to spend some time introducing some new characters that it can follow forward.
That's possible.
So, and maybe that is the plan for part 3, like Abby and Lev doing their thing with the Fireflies, and the Fireflies are still trying to find a cure or whatever. Mm-hmm. You can keep that going for forever. Maybe there's another person Maybe it's not just Ellie who's immune. Maybe there's another person.
Oh, see, but no, you can't. That'd be lame as hell.
I agree, but they could do it.
Well, okay. They could do anything. They could make it like...
People would eat that shit up.
Fast forward 800 years, and now it's a Game of Thrones show. Oh, The Last of Us was a prequel to Game of Thrones.
The post apocalypse.
Yeah, they could do anything. We're talking about like reasonable things that would be good to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing to talk about is Andor, which I think we did talk a little bit about on the last podcast.
Right. You hadn't finished it.
So I finished it. It's awesome.
Hell yeah, it's so good.
It's so good. Like, I was less invested in the third arc when they're back on Ferrix because it felt a little like, obviously it's full circle. It's a TV show. That's the point. Yeah. It was their mechanism to bring all of the characters to a single place when they've been, doing separate stories the whole time. I get it. But it was just less interesting given the setup and execution of the heist and then the setup and the execution of the prison were both both of those arcs. I was like, this is some of the best TV I've seen in a long ass time.
So good.
And that's how I felt after the prison break or the heist. And then they did the prison. I was like, wait, this is even better. And I was like, holy shit, I can't take. And so that's why I felt a little underwhelmed by the final arc when they were back on Ferrix. The only negative that I have, or it's not even a negative, it's just more like an I wish that I feel like I would have enjoyed the show because I find Cassian to be a very uninteresting character, and even on the show, he's always the least interesting person in every scene, and so I kind of wish that this show would have just been a new character, and he or she could have been similar, but just a different, more interesting character. And so that was a little bit of a bummer, but in a way it kind of works because he's he's the narrative through line, but the show is so much more about the other characters and the tension and the stakes of everything, and that is what is compelling to me. Yeah. The best parts of Cassian are whenever he would jump in and be like, no, y'all are idiots. This is what we're going to do. That's that was his only real purpose. Yeah, I wasn't really interested
to move things forward.
Yeah. I was never really interested in his personal journey and him getting back to his mom and the way they set up in the beginning of he's looking for his sister and then never bring it back up even at the end of the season, which was very odd. Right. And I'm assuming they're making more of it. They should, obviously. And so I'm assuming that will come back into play in some way, shape, or form. But, oh, man. I like The Mandalorian, but Andor is awesome. It's the best Star Wars thing since Return of the Jedi.
Agreed.
Yeah. Hopefully
Which is great. More. That original animated Clone Wars show, the cartoon animated Clone Wars show, damn, that thing's good, but I also don't think it necessarily ages super well.
Well, it
it's not canon anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't even an official thing. They accepted it after the fact because everybody loved it so much.
Yeah. So this is the best canon Star Wars thing since Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. Well, all right. Now that we have closed the loop on all the video games and relevant TV stuff after 2.5 hours. There's not a ton of news, and we don't need to spend a ton of time about any of these specific things. But how about you walk us through the news section? I guess to start off with the Ubisoft shenanigans.
Yeah, we spent some time talking about Ubisoft. So why don't we keep talking about Ubisoft? They canceled 3 unannounced games, and also delayed Skull and Bones again. Yeah, so that game doesn't exist, right?
It absolutely does. It's just not good. But they I don't know the details of this, but they borrowed money from a foreign government to make the game.
Yes.
And so they literally have to release it or else they're on the hook for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I guess that
potentially
could be bad, huh?
Yves Guillemot or some family member being, imprisoned. Not actually, but
the kneecaps busted.
That movie, that game will come out. It will be bad, but it will come out.
And it won't make its money back.
Absolutely not.
Certainly not at this point. So, it's a shame about the 3 canceled unannounced games.
But is it, honestly?
But maybe not, because if they were all just going to be a Ubisoft game, then what's the harm in them going away?
So I just for funsies, I pulled a list of their recent game releases, like the biggins, because one of the things they said, Yves Guillemot said, was that they were going to be focusing in on live service games, as like, because that's what they need to be a constant revenue driver. And that's what analysts say, like that's the movement of the industry is you need live service, you need continual revenue and increasing player bases. You can't just go release to release. So looking at their recent live service games, because this isn't new for them. And like the framing around it was like, oh, we've got to invest more in this. But they put out a lot of live service games over the past several years.
Yeah.
Rainbow Six Siege, which still, by all accounts, does very well for them.
That's their, like, one real success.
For Honor, I think, was a success in that it outperformed expectations, and there's still, like, a pretty big, devoted following of that game.
Sure.
But other than that, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Ghost Recon Extraction. All 3 games, colossal failures.
Yeah.
The Division 2... not a failure, but certainly underwhelming and definitely underperformed compared to the first game, which showed a lot of promise that they didn't execute on in the second game.
And I don't know what happened there. Like, the second game is good. They just marketed it for crap. Like, they didn't push it right, or that it wasn't timed right, or something. I don't know what the deal with that is, but like, as someone who really, really liked the first Division. For some reason, the second one just never jumped out and was like, yeah, I should pick that up and play it.
Well, and to Ubisoft's credit, by and large, like with games that have caught on, the live service games, they've done a really good job supporting them over time.
Sure.
And like, you know, nurturing the fan base, etc. And they did that with the first Division. But it didn't seem, from an outside perspective, it didn't seem like they did that with the second game as much.
No.
Like they kind of gave up on it.
They've been very quick to give up lately. Like, if a thing isn't working, they'll just pull the plug and move on to the next thing. And I mean,
speaking of
you've just got to be setting money on fire that way.
The last 3 live service games to mention: Roller Champions. Hey, remember that game? It got like shit canned like a month after it released. Riders Republic, same story, and Hyperscape, same story. That was their like PUBG, whatever it's called.
Oh.
Battle Royale, thank you. Equivalent that they gave up on immediately. So especially recently, a lot of their attempts at live service have failed and they've given up on them extremely quickly. But part of the argument of like, we need to focus on the live service games because our like big tentpole releases aren't driving enough revenue because they're so spread out. Let's look at the single player games that they've put out. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Assassin's Creed remasters of the old games, Watch Dogs Legion, Far Cry 5, Far Cry New Dawn, Far Cry 6, Immortals Phoenix Rising, which granted that was a new IP and it has a lot of interesting ideas.
But
and
it
Just
is an
Dance.
Assassin's Creed
But
game.
yeah, it's an Assassin's Creed clone. And then Just Dance. Like all of these games are the same. It's 2 games. That's it. Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. Those are the only games they've been making. Even Watch Dogs Legion. Like I didn't like that game, but it had ideas at least. The whole mechanic around recruiting people and changing characters, like it was a cool thing, but they took this cool idea and shoved it into their generic open world structure, which is all they do. So I hate this idea that they're like, we need to invest more in this other thing because what we've been doing isn't working. When like, duh, dude, because what you've been doing is the same thing for like a decade. You have to try new things.
Right.
And then you have Yves Guillemot, like his whole speech that he made to the company of
man.
like the ball's in your court now to execute when like him and his family are the ones running the company into the ground. It's just really, really frustrating to see all this stuff happen. Yeah. And it just taking no accountability for it at all. And even on the horizon, like they've got Assassin's Creed Mirage, which granted looks cool because it's a very old school Assassin's Creed style game. But then they have freaking Avatar, which I'm very, very curious to see how that pans out.
Yeah, also very curious.
Both of those movies are like in the top 5 all-time grossing movies, and yet no one ever talks about either of them. So, like, can a game push through that? Like, will people care?
Yeah.
And then they say they have other unannounced premium games, which, like,
I bet you there is another Far Cry. And then they've got a bunch of free-to-play stuff that they're working on.
Just like, where the fuck is Splinter Cell, man?
I bet you that's one of the. I bet you that's one of the canceled unannounced games.
I'm sure, because they couldn't find a way to monetize it properly.
Right. Because it would have just been a single-player, game.
Yeah, because $70 isn't good enough.
Yeah, you can't put cosmetics into a Splinter Cell game. You could change. Right. Maybe you could change the color of his little headlights.
The little 3 lights.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, it's annoying. It's very annoying.
Yep. So Ubisoft making the same game over and over and over again. Back to the Day Before, which is a video game, maybe, that uses assets that have perchance been used over and over and over again,
or at least just like stock Unreal Engine 5 assets.
Correct. Yeah. So there is an asset store, and that asset store exists for the purposes of opening up game development to small teams who maybe don't have a few $100,000 to throw at generating art assets that are effectively going to look the same as a lot of other games set in contemporary places. So the Day Before, this is kind of a crazy one. Like we talked about it last episode. It was the second most wishlisted game on Steam. It was supposed to release on the 1st of March. There was this whole drama around whether the game was real or not, because some of the gameplay that they had shown didn't really have some, there were a lot of people who were game developers who were looking at it that were saying, I don't know how you're baking lighting that way in a multiplayer environment. I don't know how you're doing that on the engine. That doesn't make sense. Some people who make games were poking holes in some of the footage, saying, I don't know how they accomplished this, blah, blah, blah. Then they had the Steam page went away for the game. And they said it was over a copyright
a month
dispute.
Before it's supposed to release.
Correct. They said it was over a copyright dispute over the name The Day Before.
Well, wait. Because at first they just said it's just like a little glitch. We'll get it taken care of. And then the next day is when they were like, oh, no, it's a copyright thing.
Yeah. And then they say, we'll have this copyright thing sorted by November. So they pushed it to November. And then in another interview after that, the developer said, yeah, well, we were going to delay it before the copyright thing happened, but then the copyright thing happened, and so we just did it then.
And they were also supposed to release a new gameplay trailer. Which, when the copyright thing happened, they delayed the gameplay trailer as well. Which, I don't know how those two things are related.
Right. So, a lot of people assumed this game was not real. It does not exist in any form. The things that they've shown were just a way for them to serve up advertisements for their own proprietary virtual working environment, sort of like a Microsoft Teams program. I'm not even going to say the name of it because I don't want to give it an advertisement. But they it's just weird shit like that. Turns out the day we're recording this podcast, the gameplay trailer dropped out of nowhere.
10-minute gameplay video.
10 minutes. Yeah, and it is all 10 minutes of uncut gameplay. And the gameplay is a character and another character, presumably another human player, walking through a suburb environment, kind of going into a couple houses, picking up some items, some loot, going into a crafting menu, adjusting scopes and attachments on a weapon, adding a silencer, changing stock, the weapon model changes, the weapon model in real time changes on the character's back and looks different and blah, blah, blah. They proceed into a city, and all of this is happening in real time, and it's streaming new areas in or whatever, so they're showing their tech there, and they get into a city, they kill some zombies, they shoot some zombies and go through a couple side alleys and go into a larger structure, and that's kind of the demo. They kill a
just
few
sort
zombies.
Of fades to black at the end.
Yeah, so that's their gameplay trailer, and then a really bad voiceover says, "The Day Before, coming this November." And it literally sounds like I just did that. It sounds very bad.
What you're not capturing, Kyle, in this gameplay is the nothingness of what they show in this gameplay.
Like, it is a barren, open world city. There's nothing happening. I was watching the demo on YouTube, and someone commented there are 14 zombies in a 10-minute gameplay trailer. The menu that they pull up, the crafting menu, is a literal just like asset swap of some conglomeration of other like a PUBG style menu of it's very like, it's not stylized whatsoever or themed in any way. It's, very point and click. I left a couple of notes as I was watching it. In that menu, the character puts on a new reticle on their assault rifle, which obviously when you get back out of the menu, you see the reticle on there. But when you ADS, because it's third person, it's just a dot on your screen where you're aiming. Meaning that changing the reticle doesn't change at all how you aim shoot the gun, which I just thought is really fun.
Changing the scope doesn't really do anything.
It doesn't do anything other than change how it looks on the gun. All of the zombies animate the exact same way. So when they spot you, they're sort of like kind of hunched and looking. And then when they look over you, they all animate exactly the same, where they kind of rear up and then turn. And then most of them are dead by the time that happens. So like, wow, what a huge threat they pose. But the ones that do run just run in a straight line at you. And none of the zombies get within 20 feet of the player character. So there's no real tension. There's no drama or challenge that's happening. And again, it just feels like they copy pasted these animations onto these characters. And then I noticed really faked, because they go into this building where they're using their flashlights, and it's a cool aesthetic. Like, it's worth mentioning the literal fidelity of the graphics for being this supposedly giant open world MMO style game are super impressive. Really detailed things that are in the environment. And when you go into the building, the lighting looks very cool. It's super dim. You have your flashlight that kind of moves around. But then she starts shooting zombies, and the muzzle flash happens, but it doesn't react. Nothing reacts to the flash of the muzzle, because it gives off light. And so, like, literally, they just used an element for muzzle flash and added it without adding it as a lighting element, which, like, hey, not a game designer here, but like, that's kind of 101 shit that you would do that they clearly didn't. The whole thing not only feels extremely empty and, to be clear, like, faked, but also it feels like something that they finished making last night and started making a few days before that, because there's very little interactivity. They specifically go in areas
started making it the day before.
The day before. They go in a couple buildings, but it's very clear that all of the other buildings you cannot go inside.
Right.
They walk past a bunch of cars and stuff where little icons pop up that indicate that you could search them. But when they do go up to a car to search it, the indicator is different, which again makes me feel like the indicators that they don't interact with are fake. You can't actually, in that version of the game, interact with those things. They just added those elements to make it look like you could.
Yeah.
But my biggest...
You and I lived through the Final Fantasy 13 trailer fiasco. So we are prepared. We are battle hardened.
I like that game.
Look for, but remember that trailer?
Oh yes. There are so many examples.
What the game is like.
Killzone 2, or maybe it was Killzone 3, whichever one. That one was super famous for not being at all representative of the game. But to me, the biggest takeaway, which I absolutely recommend everybody go check out this trailer, because that cake on that character model. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah. And you don't have to put anything in the world when you got an ass like that.
Like, they knew what they were doing.
Else.
And what is so funny, so I watched the IGN version on their YouTube channel, and I was reading through the comments, just dying with laughter at all of the comments about this player character's ass. It was so funny. Like, all these like winky face things, and my contribution was just to say the cake is a lie, which I was pretty proud of.
That is really good.
So that's the day before. Is it a video game? I guess we'll know in November, or maybe we won't.
It's like someone opened an Italian restaurant, and you go in to get food and be served, and they have like a table with no chairs, and in the kitchen they have a stove, or no, they have one of those propane heating things, those tiny little tabletop propane heaters,
okay,
and a can of SpaghettiOs, and they're like, yeah, this is an Italian restaurant,
but actually that they don't have the can opener either.
Right? Yeah. They don't have the can opener. No. You have to loot that from a car that might not actually.
Right?
Be
yeah,
lootable.
exactly. Oh man, the way that they changed the names of the brands was so tacky in that video.
Yeah.
Because normally when they do that, like High on Life is a good example of this. They make it jokey or like some sort of reference or correlation, but instead of CVS, it's BVS.
Yeah.
Like, okay, why? Like, what? What's the... Huh? Instead of a Twix candy bar, it's a Quicks candy bar.
Yep.
You know, it's like that thing. But...
It's because the amount of time it took to change that logo and think of a different idea was quick.
Oy. So, if nothing else,
good.
it's a fun story to follow. But unfortunate that these people keep getting attention from it, which is really all they're looking for anyway.
Correct, yes. Because at the end of the day, any press is good press when you're trying to hawk shitty teams.
When you're a freaking con artist, of course.
Yeah.
All right,
some not so fun news to follow.
Let's get to the bad news.
Yeah. There were layoffs across the entire games industry, the tech industry. People got hit really, really hard over the past month or so. Google Alphabet, they cut 12,000 jobs, which is 6% of their workforce. They're like one of the largest employers, and 12,000 people are out of work, were laid off because of this. More, narrowing focus to the games industry specifically, Riot Games had some layoffs. They laid off about 46 people, which is about 1% of their workforce. Fandom, which is a big gaming tech industry website, they run a lot of wiki pages for a lot of games. There's like the Dark Souls wiki on Fandom is really famous.
Not well loved.
Not well loved, but famous. Infamous, I would even say. They recently purchased from Red Ventures, formerly of CBS, GameSpot, and Giant Bomb, and 10% of Fandom's workforce was laid off. They have about 500 employees, so that's about 50 people. So GameSpot and Giant Bomb got hit with layoffs. Two of Giant Bomb's 3 video editors / producers were laid off, so they only have one guy who does video production now.
Yeah,
which is super cool for a content website. And Microsoft laid off about 4.5% of their workforce, which was about 10,000 people,
and including a lot of people from 343. That was one of the
correct.
More heavily
So this is Microsoft wide, so this includes not just their gaming division, but within their gaming division, I mean, pretty much everybody was hit. I have to imagine the only people who maybe weren't touched would be, I didn't hear about anything coming out of Bethesda. I think they probably pretty much left them alone to work on Starfield because they know it's going to generate so much money. But 343 got hit pretty hard. And, obviously, like, just those 4 companies, that's like, I don't know, over 22,000 people without jobs now.
Yep.
That's
because
really
their
shitty.
companies aren't making money fast enough. It's not even that they're losing money.
No, it's these companies are reporting record profits. It's all because there's an anticipation of a recession.
They're afraid that they're not going to make as much profit.
Yeah, so they're firing people early.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a whole manifesto.
Indiscriminately too. Like largely, like the ones at Fandom specifically, it was basically a lottery system.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
So I don't know how it worked at like Microsoft and Google and Riot or whatever, but at Fandom it was largely like a lottery system.
And I work in tech and in B2B specifically, and a lot of companies have bigger layoffs than these percentage wise. You know, we're talking 15-20% of their like workforce almost every time I log on LinkedIn, I see another company has laid off a significant percentage of their employees. And again, it's because of anticipated market shrinkage, which if you lay a bunch of people off and you lower your revenue targets, then there's going to be contraction. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I could, and I want to go on a huge tirade about this. All of our listeners are saved by the fact that we are 3 hours in for me to not do this. I have extremely strong feelings about the way that this shit works and the fact that we're all working our jobs to keep the rich people rich, and they make decisions that hurt the company. And then when that company gets hurt, they keep their jobs and we lose ours. And it is a completely fucked up system, and exactly the way that Reagan intended trickle-down economics to work. Because this is a properly functioning economy we have here, where rich people never get punished and the non-rich people always do, when none of us are actually the decision makers that make the decisions that hurt these things. So there you go. There's a sneak preview of my militant manifesto to overthrow capitalism.
And scene.
All right, let's move into some better news.
Yes, yeah. Microsoft held their developer showcase, which the timing felt weird because they just let a bunch of people go. So here's some games that the survivors are working on.
Yeah.
So this is where they announced Hi-Fi Rush,
right?
And said that it was available now on Game Pass. So they showed that off. They talked about Minecraft Legends and showed some gameplay there. For those who don't know, that's the tactics, kind of real-time strategy-esque Minecraft game.
How do you feel about that? Like, what
I don't care about it.
You don't like?
No.
Because they hadn't talked that much about it, and my vibe was always like they're still figuring out what kind of game it's going to be, which is a little scary. But this, they actually showed how the mechanics.
Yeah, they
show
the mechanics, and
I think it looks
they
cool.
talk about some strategies. Yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's multiplayer, and I don't play as many of those games, but it looks fun. Like
fans of the genre.
Yeah, like even Minecraft Dungeons, which again is intended to be played multiplayer, I played exclusively by myself, and I had a good time with it for several hours. Like, it's cool. It's cool that they're allowed to do other stuff with, and it when Microsoft acquired Mojang, like that was the question. What else are these guys going to do with Minecraft? Minecraft 2? What the hell is that? So it's cool that they're making other types of games in that universe of the IP. Just not as much.
It's clear that the brand has legs, and there's a charm to it that works outside of the regular format. So. Yeah, and like the Telltale games were a lot of fun. Those were super charming and and were a good time. Yeah, Patton Oswalt did a voice. Yeah, he voiced the main character. So they showed off Minecraft Legends that's releasing on April 18th. They also had a bit of an extended section on Redfall, which is coming out on May 2nd. That's a new Arcane Studios game. Hot on the trails of Deathloop, which I believe was pretty mixed, received in a pretty mixed way. Like,
and
people
on the
either really loved it or hated it.
Like, it got some 10 out of 10s. It won some Game of the Years, and other people were like, this game's garbage.
Yeah, they panned it. Yeah. I thought it was hot garbage.
I did not think it was hot garbage, but I did not like it hardly at all.
I played it and thought, I don't understand where the fun happens.
It was like room temperature garbage.
Sure, yeah. Potential to heat up in the sun. But Redfall, I'm tenuously excited about Redfall.
Really?
The developers have said that this is kind of their take on a Far Cry-like, where it's a large open world, but with their penchant for environmental storytelling and things like that. I just think aesthetically, it looks like their Arcane style has been boiled down with Fortnite style.
Well, yeah.
And I hate it.
I don't really like the Arcane visual style. At least like the Dishonored and Deathloop. Prey was very different, which I did like. But
yes.
I agree that this is sort of like a Fortnite-ification of their style, which is like bad
mobile gamification.
Bad,
mobile game adification.
Yeah.
Like those CG mobile game ads.
I'm not seeing the Far Cry in this game. Like, I guess from the like it's mini bosses sort of thing, but like, it's not like they haven't made an open world game before. That's most of their games.
Yeah, but no, their games are always sandbox. Like there are like limited area open world. You travel from area to area, loading screen style. I think this is meant to be one large contiguous open world.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of what they're touting it as being different.
I mean, it just like every single box of this game is unappealing to me. And it's like the vampires, no thank you. The visual style, no thank you. The co-op kind of stuff, no thank you. Even like the gunplay and the sort of powers don't seem that interesting to me. And I have yet to play an Arcane game that I have liked. And this by no means seems to be the one that will turn me around. The closest that's come has been Prey.
I want to like them more than I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Prey is the one standout for me that I like. I love Prey.
Yeah. I wanted
to.
But
like even Dishonored, there's a lot of diminishing returns there for me in Dishonored because I found the way in which I want to play the game, and it's not particularly varied. And so it becomes like, I'm going to play all these games the same way. Mm-hmm. So effectively, I don't know what I'm doing here anymore.
Right,
right. And that's on me to not like experiment with things or whatever. That's just how I tend to play. I always tend to go like, I find a groove and I ride that groove until it's, a valley. So that's the way I tend to do things just because it's the way my brain works. But that's how I get my dopamine hits.
Yeah.
But and so it'll be on Game Pass when it comes out, so I'll play it because it's on Game Pass. It's co-op. I'll play it with some friends probably just to see what that's like. Will I beat it? Probably not.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So they had a good lengthy bit of gameplay during that developer showcase. So if you are listening at home and you have not seen that yet, feel free to go check it out. They also mentioned that Elder Scrolls Online Necrom is releasing on June 20th. That's the newest expansion. You can miss me with that.
We talked about this last time. Like, it's a game that I would like to put some time into and give it a fair shake, but I know that I won't.
Right.
I'm glad that it's going. I'm glad
that people are having a good time.
Yeah.
And it seems like the developers are really into it. And if E3 has ever been something to judge, that one lady really fucking likes ESO, man.
That's what
I
makes
hope she's
me
still repping.
Not want to play the game. Because those are the developers. Those aren't like fans of the game, the people that never shut up. Those are the employees. They're so annoying.
Yeah. Love what you do, and you'll never work a day in your life. Know
That's
what I mean?
Not true.
Forza Motorsport. It's coming out sometime this year.
Weird that they didn't have a release date for
game
this, because everything else had a release date. Which
it
seemed like that was part of the point, to say like, here's the stuff coming out over the next 6 months, and then we'll have another one in the future that's focused on Starfield, which I'm sure will be their big fall game. Which maybe not, maybe it'll release sooner, but I would anticipate it coming out in the fall. So it was just weird for Forza to not have a date, but not that either of us particularly care about that.
Right. So that's pretty much all that came out of that. Just, of special note, looking forward to that Starfield developer showcase. Hopefully soon.
Yeah, we'll see.
Moving on, EA has canceled an unannounced game in the Apex or Titanfall universe. This came out today. One Jeff Grubb over at GiantBomb.com talked about this on his Game Mess Mornings show. He reported this, and I don't know if he was the first one to report this. He's the first one I saw report
I don't know.
I should say that. So this was originally going to be a game that was like Apex Legends takes place in the Titanfall universe. Mm-hmm. They are tonally very different things. Mm-hmm. This was going to be a way of kind of bridging those two tones.
Yeah.
Because it was going to be Apex Legends characters, you play as them, and you discover a chassis or a core of BT, the Titan that you play alongside in the second Titanfall game that everyone loves. You find that BT's core, you refurbish it, you rebuild it and bring BT back to life, and then there's some threat that you're trying to address, some MacGuffin. BT is the MacGuffin essentially that brings you into this into this threat, and all the Apex Legends characters are coming in helping you out along the way, and maybe you're playing as them or whatever, who knows. So that was kind of the pitch for the game, is it was going to be sort of a blending of those two narrative styles in the same universe.
It was going to be called A Titan Pex Legends Fall.
Yep, nailed it. But that's why they canceled it. They couldn't think of a good
come
name.
up with a better name than that.
There is I forget the guy's name. He was a designer on the first and second Titanfall, and he hasn't touched any of the Apex Legends stuff, and supposedly he's leading a project there at the development studio. So there's still a potential for there maybe to be something Titanfall related.
I can't see it happening.
But I don't.
This to me was their attempt at that. Like, neither
Right.
Titanfall game did that well commercially, and Apex Legends has taken
they
off.
were more of like cult hits after the second one was a cult hit after the fact. The first one was a semi-popular online mode, effectively.
Right.
That's
But
all it was.
They weren't Apex Legends.
Correct.
That game is doing gangbusters still, and obviously the
Yeah.
Star Wars Jedi games are, like, the first one did very well. The second one comes out in a couple of months, which actually it was recently delayed a couple weeks, which sucks. But to me, this was like our last chance at getting another Titanfall game from them, because they're also working on a first-person Star Wars game.
Star Wars, first person, So I'm very interested in seeing what that is when that comes out.
Yeah.
But you can miss me with all this Apex stuff.
Yeah.
Some unannounced Sony games. Sony came out and said they have a bunch of games in the works.
Well,
They
there's been some like leaks that have come out too.
There was a
that
leaked
are
screenshot,
potentially
not a
related.
screenshot. It was a short video of a game very early in development where it's clearly some sort of like a sci-fi something. There's a
like
character walking
third-person,
along, and there's a large event happening in the distance of a creature in a large building, and so it's very early, unsure of what that might be, if it's like a new property or what that is. So that leaked. So, and Sony has come out and said that they're looking to produce 12 live service games by 2026,
which is crazy. That was the big thing.
We only know of a few of them so far.
Well, and I mean, when they bought Bungie, that's specifically what they said, is we want to leverage their expertise in live service to launch live service games, but 12 is a lot in 4 years. 3 years. Really.
And if the rest of the industry is anything to go by,
they don't
six
always
of those
hit.
will be canceled.
Yeah.
6 of those will be canceled before they come out and you even hear about them. So there's been leaked gameplay of a Horizon multiplayer game. Looks very kind of Monster Hunter like.
Which, like, the game itself, like the creatures and the environment looked very much like Horizon, but the character models were like more Fortnite-y, cartoony, which I thought was interesting. Which obviously it's unfinished, who knows? But I thought that was an interesting thing. Like, excuse me, I wonder if they're maybe going for a more lighthearted take on that world, because the two Horizon games are pretty self-serious.
Yeah, I think you know, if you're going to try to do a live service game, you want it to hit as wide of an audience as possible, and you need to make it a little more palatable, so you tone that stuff down, probably.
Yeah.
Which inherently makes it less interesting. Potentially. Allegedly, there's Horizon MMO in the works as well. This could be the same thing.
Yeah, could be.
I know they're doing the PSVR 2 Horizon game.
Yes, that comes
so
out.
It seems like they're really
this month.
Yeah. It seems like they're really plumbing the depths of that brand.
Well, because I was thinking about this as I was reading this story too, and like, if you think about it, I mean, there's potential that Spider-Man will continue, but like, what are they going to do with God of War next?
Right.
Killzone is dead in the water. Naughty Dog has specifically said that they're done with Uncharted. They're most likely maybe done with The Last of Us. Like, Sony needs, Ratchet and Clank still going, but who knows? Like, there have been a million of those games. They need to build more atmosphere around their big games. And Horizon is like one of the few relatively new creations that they can expand upon. So I just thought it makes sense to me. And obviously the world of those games is very, very cool and, rife for a lot of different styles of game. MMO, Monster Hunter style, competitive multiplayer,
You can do a lot in that universe.
Telltale game? Yeah.
Maybe not that.
There's also some kind of a third-person sci-fi shooter.
That was the one that you mentioned. There was like a 5-second
the video leak.
The interesting note about that is allegedly it's being made through XDev, which is kind of their like partner program studio.
Yeah,
so potentially
they
like
have their fingers in a lot of different.
Yeah,
they've provided support on a lot of game development.
Could be like a second-party exclusive style game, not necessarily a Sony development house game. In fact, it likely isn't a first-party Sony studio working on that game.
Right. Supposed to have a new IP from Bungie by 2025, so that would fall within that bucket for sure.
Yeah.
And
the
Bungie,
live service.
It's going to be a live service game. What that looks like, nobody but them knows. And then there's that Last of Us multiplayer game.
Right.
You don't make a multiplayer game now without some live service plans, so they're going to have something in there to monetize the hell out of you. So I just look forward to seeing what that is and, temper my expectations.
Sure.
Hopefully, I mean, they tend to, Naughty Dog only does things that they are very interested in doing, and if they have a very good idea for a thing, they're not the kind of studio that's going to want to do the same thing that other people are doing. They're not going to want to emulate the same thing other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a feeling they're going to swing for the fences and try something different with this. What that is, I have no idea, but at least I know it's going to be set apart from the herd in some kind of way. This ain't Ubisoft we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, despite my feelings about Last of Us Part 2, like they're still a premier studio in gaming, and they've earned a ton of goodwill from me and benefit of the doubt. Despite me not liking multiplayer games, there is zero chance that I won't give this a shot, regardless of what it is. So
yeah, that's where I am as well. And then last bit of news here. Again, we're just, we do this once a month. We try to pick the big stuff that we're interested in talking about. Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo are all likely to skip E3.
So it's it's not.
So that begs the question:
who's going to E3?
Why are we having E3?
Well, because they already said we were, and they kind of got backed into a corner because Jeff Keighley forced them there, and so
fair.
I don't think it's a huge surprise, maybe with the exception of Nintendo, because Sony skipped E3 before COVID, and then Microsoft has been doing their own thing post COVID. Nintendo,
and that has super been working out.
Yeah, that's the reality of it, is they don't need to spend hundreds, millions of dollars on a booth space. And it really, to me, it just cements the new approach to E3 being more of a Gamescom, which the event company that is running E3 now runs Gamescom. And so that makes a ton of sense that that's what they're trying to do. Make it a user thing. Let people play some early games, but also be focused on community stuff. Do dev panels, merch, all of the random brands of energy drinks and shit that are there. Like, that feels like what E3 is going to be, which is very, very sad. Like, not that I like the ESA, not that I like how E3 has been going, but it being like the tentpole week in video gaming, it sucks to lose that, because you can't replace the energy of that and the excitement. Like, I used to take off work for those couple of days and just watch press conferences all day, and like, I would still do that. I will be 35 when E3 happens. I would still have taken a couple days off of work to do that. And there's no way I will, because there's no faith that it'll actually be important enough to justify that. And instead, we get these individual... We'll have a Microsoft thing and a Sony thing. I'm sure Nintendo will do a Nintendo Direct around that time, and that's all fine. But it's not the same kind of energy.
It's not a jamboree.
Yeah.
I want a gamer jamboree.
Yeah.
Feed me.
It sucks, but it's the way it works now. It just is. And it was already trending that way before COVID, and COVID really just cemented it. Like, it's so much easier and cheaper for these companies to own their own narrative. And they don't, like, one of the purposes of E3 back in the day was that was the week when non-gaming media paid attention.
when you would get a Wall Street Journal article about video games, because it would talk about E3 and have you all heard about this thing, video games? Like, it had that very boomer energy to it, but it added relevance. And they don't need to do that anymore. They don't need additional media coverage. And the secondary benefit of the old E3 was for buyers at brick and mortar stores. Again, not relevant anymore. So the core purposes of E3 as it was don't matter anymore. And frankly, like, it should be done. They shouldn't be bringing it back. But in my mind, I think there's a lot of hubris involved with the ESA being pissed about these big companies having backed out before, losing relevance, having Jeff Keighley come in and do his own thing and overtake them in the wakes of COVID and doing his Summer Games Fest stuff. And I think that they were pissed and they were like, no, we're the big guy. We can come and do it. And I would not at all be surprised for this to be the last one.
Yeah. I agree.
So,
and I'm fine with that. Put this damn horse to rest. You know, its leg's been broken for a long time.
Just bring out the shotgun.
Yeah. just shoot it in the head.
All right. So
on that note,
moving on. Originally, I wanted to talk through a bunch of games from 2019, 2020, 2021, because we didn't get to do the podcast then, so it would be fun. We don't have time for that, which is okay. Instead, what was your favorite game from 2019? Let's just do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe in a future podcast we can go back. But
sure. Oh man, I'm not gonna say favorite game. All right. I will highlight. So
you're not
going
to answer
that
the
I
question.
want to talk about.
Cool.
You changed the prompt on me, so I get to flip the script, buddy boy. I want to talk about Terminator Resistance for a second.
Okay. That is the if you gave me 100 guesses, I wouldn't have gotten
it. If there were 99 games that came out in 2019 and you had 100 guesses, you would not have guessed Terminator Resistance.
Yeah.
So like it's not a good game, but it's like surprisingly functional in a way that a game titled Terminator Resistance should not be. Like, yeah, it functions. Like, it's not broken. It doesn't, like, you don't boot it up and then it, like, blue screens your PlayStation or whatever. Like, it works. It's a function. It should work.
What is this game? I don't even think I know what this game is.
It's a first-person shooter with very light upgrade crafting things going on. Very light. And it's, like sandbox areas that you can go around in and, like, you know, fight some robots and fight some Terminators. And it's kind of like some of the mission structures like a little open-ended where you can kind of like tackle things the way you want to tackle them and assault these compounds the way you want to assault them. And you can stealth, you can go in guns blazing. They have like the giant robot things that you have to like kind of skirt around and like, cause you can't fight them cause they're massive and all you have is like a machine gun. Like you get stuff later to fight that kind of thing. It's just like surprisingly competent, and like you can see it is being held together with a hope and a prayer. Like there are hamsters on the wheels, like just running, like trying to keep the cogs. Yeah, robo hamsters trying to keep the cogs turning. But it's just like it's shocking that it all works and came together coherently. Okay. Like it has a focus and it does the thing it sets out to do, and it's completely inoffensive. And I think for that reason, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because otherwise no one would know.
That, you know what?
I respect if I don't say it, no one will.
I respect that.
Because no one else played it.
I'm going to take this in a less surprising direction and talk about Control, which ironically we were talking about. I think in the last episode, I hadn't started it yet, or I had just started it. That game is so dope. Like,
totally.
I think for me at least, the combat wore out its welcome a little bit towards the end, mostly because I had my weapon combo that I liked. and so every encounter felt kind of the same. And there were a handful of enemies that were just a huge pain in the ass. Like all of the flying guys, basically, were just a pain in the ass to deal with. That they weren't fun to fight. But the atmosphere of that game, like the best descriptor that I can give of the impact the world of that game has is whenever you enter a new area and the big block yellow letters of like,
yeah,
and it does it's like a goon, and it's like goon, the garage, and it's just like it just dominates everything on the screen. It's
and
so,
you're like, fuck yeah,
like,
I'm in
hell
the garage.
Yeah, dude, I want to fucking kill some dudes in the garage. Like, this sounds awesome. But because again, I don't like spooky stuff, but this is right on the line of, it had some elements of horror to it, but it was mostly that like thriller. Yeah.
Don't get me started on the fucking fridge.
The fridge was rough.
Bro is what I meant to say.
But I also think that not all of the narrative worked for me. Like the resolution and frankly, like the lack of resolution to the story with the brother in particular. But like even the way that and I'm spacing on the name of the thing that's in your head, whatever it was called, the voice that speaks to you, the way that it resolves and she kind of turns on you or whatever, I found a little.
Is it like the manager or something?
No, I want to say it starts with an O. Like it's some sort of like extraterrestrial force kind of thing.
Right.
But anyway, that didn't, like, I didn't love how that resolved, but man, the journey to get there and the twists and turns, it was so fun to just explore and find all those objects of power, because they all have such unique engagement things where like some of them are comment based and some of them are puzzles and some of them are just like weird batshit things. And like the
little
maze.
nod to Alan Wake.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, and it's very X-Files, Twilight Zone. Like, it's very clearly inspired by all those things. But the maze section, when they like just jam out to that music and you're just blowing dudes away, was so I was so hyped up. Man, that game, like, all of the atmosphere, and I think I described it this way when I wrote up my Game of the Year post, is like the atmosphere of that game, I think, is literally perfect. Like, the way that it establishes a sense of place and builds its world, and the way it encourages you, like I craved every single piece of filing paper I could find to read it and listen to the audio logs and the old kind of recordings from the director, which they do in this really cool Twin Peaks style video that's like kind of FMV. Man, it just the vibe and the style of that game is just absolutely incredible. Big, very high up on my favorite games of the last decade for sure.
Totally.
Let's move to 2020.
Yeah, 2020. Gosh, I wonder what mine's going to be. The Last of Us Part 2.
I thought you were going to go Cyberpunk.
In terms of the best game?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, Last of Us Part 2.
It makes sense.
Cyberpunk, honorary mention.
Yeah.
I don't need to, like, I feel like we've talked about both of those enough.
Yes. I will say
we've got that. What's yours?
I will save you Last of Us Part 2 conversation.
Thank you.
For me, like, I struggled with this because in my heart, it's Spiritfarer. That game spoke to me emotionally and just absolutely destroyed me playing it. I've been listening to, because I've been working on writing up my 2020 Game of the Year post, because it's super relevant now, right? And so one of my categories is for best music, and so I've been re-listening to a lot of old music from games of that year, and I put on the Spiritfarer soundtrack, and immediately I was like, nope, I can't listen to this because it brings up all those emotions. So that's where my heart goes, but I can't not give it to Ghost of Tsushima, because that game, like, not that it is one-to-one like Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild did so many more inventive open world things, but Ghost of Tsushima did inventive open world things while also having systems that I liked engaging with, which is not true of Breath of the Wild. Like, I didn't like the combat, I didn't like the cooking, I didn't like the UI navigation and changing weapons, I didn't like the temples and all that shit. All of the engagement systems in Ghost of Tsushima
I dug hardcore, and it did cool stuff with the following the fox for those missions and the guiding wind to bring you to your next location instead of just putting a map marker on your sort of navigation compass. The golden bird that would guide you towards little secrets and stuff. Like, oh, holy shit. Just that game I loved living in. And I, like, as a testament to how much I loved it, I got the platinum in that game and I did literally everything there was to do. And then when the director's cut came out and the DLC on Iki Island or whatever, I wanted to go do that, but I needed a refresher. So I was going to jump into the game, just play a little bit to refamiliarize myself with the combat. And instead I was like, let me start it over. This will be a fun game to replay. So I did that. And my intention was, I'm just going to play through the game and the story and whatever. But no, I did everything in the game again. I 100%ed the game again and got the platinum trophy again. And then went and did the island and did all the shit on the island. Like, that is not something I do in video games. But right. Living in that universe, the beauty and the particle effects, holy shit, Sucker Punch. Like, they nailed it with Infamous Second Son. And this is like on another level. They're bragging with their particle effects in this game, with the leaves and like the snow and the sand and the dust, and so sick. Yeah. How about 2021?
Man, Resident Evil Village was so good. But I gotta give it to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart.
Me too, bro.
I feel like that game restored childhood glee and joy in video games in me that I hadn't felt in a bit. And like that was just like, you know, it was like getting it's like those like you have smells from your childhood that you associate with positive memories, and every once in a while randomly you'll smell something that triggers that it's a sense memory. That's what like playing Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart was like for me. It was like triggering all of those sense memories very vividly, and it's so flippin' good.
Yes. And it's weird because like I feel like 2021 on the whole was a bit of a down year. Like there are a lot of other games that I really enjoyed, but there was no like clear cut top tier game excuse me, that I played in 2021. I played Hades in 2021 because it came out on PlayStation that year. It technically released in 2020, but I would still put Ratchet and Clank above Hades. Hades is super good, but yeah, I'm with you. The nostalgia combined with it feeling like a lot of new ideas and the story being really, really good. Like I loved the story in A Crack in Time.
So good.
But the story in this game is legitimately awesome. And, you know, I love the new characters and I was about to say, is Ratchet the new one? No, what's the new character's name? The female Lombax? It's another, I mean, it's similar to a Ratchet.
Right.
It doesn't matter. But I loved that character too. Yeah. Great game. That was fun. Yeah. That was fun. Trip down memory lane from, you know, like a couple years ago.
Right, yeah.
So
feels like a lot longer.
Before we get to the home stretch, one thing that we want to do on the podcast is also take a look ahead. You know, we talked, if you recall, last month where we both agreed to play some Scorn. We also want to look ahead to February. What games are coming out? If there are games that are going to cross over, which inevitably there are, we can talk about that. But Hogwarts Legacy comes out. I know you are very hyped for this. I am going to play this game. We were talking about it before we started recording. I'm going to play it. I probably will wait to play it because I'm not convinced that it will work as a video game. As a Harry Potter love letter, I want to do it. Like, yeah, I want to get I want to get sorted in a Ravenclaw. I want to go take a potions class. I want to explore. I want to go up to the Owlery. But like it being a video game, I'm not sold on yet. So I might end up waiting if it doesn't review particularly well. But yeah, I know you're pretty hyped up about it.
Well, it's not like I think it's going to be amazing.
Just that,
I just want to walk around.
You're going to get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Excuse me. My throat is finally wearing down with my cold after 3.5 hours. After that, on the 17th, Wild Hearts, which this is more of a U-type game, I think.
This is it's Dark Souls-esque. It's like a Dark Souls combined with a Monster Hunter style game, which looks interesting, and I believe it's on Game Pass when it launches, which I would have been interested to check it out because of that.
Yeah, I don't know that I know what this is.
I'm
I'll
wrong.
have to look it
is
up.
not. It's not on Game Pass. But yeah, it looks it does not look like my style of game. I only added it because it looked more like potentially your style of game. Which I guess you're not really a Monster Hunter person.
No,
though.
I'm not a Monhun guy. Yeah, and that seems like that's what this is.
Yeah, but it also at least I remember seeing it and hearing people talking about it, where it looked like it had a little bit more Dark Souls approach to the combat than Monster Hunter.
Developed by Omega Force.
Okay.
The Dynasty Warriors folks.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then on the 21st, Atomic Heart, which we definitely both will play. It's on Game Pass, so we'll definitely be talking about that on next episode. Not necessarily the same as Hogwarts, but like I keep seeing videos of it, and I keep being like, I just don't think you guys can pull this off. Because it looks so sick, and every enemy is different. Every environment is different, and it's like it's a small team. They haven't made a game like this before, and
they've been working on it a long time,
but
though.
Still, and I know they had a lot of budget, and Microsoft's helping out and stuff, but like, I don't know. There's something about it that like I'm afraid to get my hopes up. Maybe is what it is.
Sure,
but I'll definitely be checking that out immediately.
Is this the one you want to agree to both play and talk about?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Because I'll definitely want to play it when it releases. Yeah,
okay.
I think I've made a decision that I'm going to be focused on 2023 games, partially because of the podcast, but I'm also trying to knock through my 2022 backlog first. Before I go back to 2020, 2021, I want to get my 2022 games out. So I've got a big list of small games that I'll work through, so I'm sure I'll have some of those on the next episode. But the big games I want to focus on this year. And eventually I'll play Elden Ring, because I have Elden Ring now. So we'll see.
Right.
And then on the same day, Like a Dragon, Ishin releases, which I've never really been a Yakuza person, but...
Yeah, so I really liked Yakuza Like a Dragon because it was a turn-based game. I don't like beat-em-up combat, whatever, like the typical style of Yakuza. This is, despite being called Like a Dragon, it is back to the old style of combat.
I think they've rebranded. Like I think moving forward, they're not going to be Yakuza anymore. They're going to be Like a Dragon.
Right. I believe that's true as well. So I'll skip this one because it's not in the format in which I enjoy playing games.
Fair enough. And then Horizon Call of the Mountain comes out the 22nd in VR. I won't be playing that. Obviously, it's VR, but it's interesting. I'm curious to see what people say about it because it looks so much more mechanically dense than I figured it would be, given that it's a VR game. Like, it looks like it captures a lot of the combat stylings of Horizon, which I just think is neat. Hopefully it works out. Octopath Traveler 2 comes out on the 24th. I know we both played and liked-ish the first game. I think we both fell off pretty similar timing.
Yes.
Just
didn't like it enough to finish it.
And it was purely, well, not purely.
The writing didn't support.
It was mostly the writing. And just the interconnectedness of the characters weren't there. And also, I found the combat to be kind of repetitive, too, at a certain point. Yeah. Although, to be fair, that's most JRPGs.
Sure.
And then at the end of the month on the 28th, Destiny 2 Lightfall, which I won't be playing, but it looks so rad. The cyberpunk shit is super my jam. I'm hardcore into it. It looks really cool. And I know there's like a new green power. I don't know what it's called. But it just looks really, really cool. And a little part of me wishes that I was into Destiny still, because I want to play it. But there's 0% chance that I will get into Destiny 2 Lightfall.
It's spears in it now, right? That seems cool.
I don't know. They got everything. They got bows and stuff now.
Yeah, they got all sorts of shit.
All right. So there's your February releases. We'll definitely be playing Atomic Heart. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other stuff. You'll have more thoughts on Dead Space. I'll have more thoughts on the Quarry at least, and let more Lego. Maybe I'll finish Lego Star Wars. Although who knows? The game is really big.
It sounds like there's a lot.
All right, let's bring this baby home with our email. Thank you, Adam, for writing in. Adam writes, "Hey guys, welcome back. It was so fun seeing the podcast pop back up in my feed after so long. I know you're focused more on video games, but given that it's been a long time since the last podcast, is there any music you've been listening to lately?" So that was an interesting question. Yeah, content-wise, we're focused on video games, but email us about whatever the hell you want. We'll talk about it.
That's what emails are for, man. It's there are no boundaries here. There are no limits.
So I have not been listening to a lot of new music because that's not what I do. We listen to a lot of Disney music because my daughter loves it, and I also love it, to be fair. And
well, Adam didn't ask if you're listening to new music, just asked,
"Oh,
is
you
there
know
any
what?
music
Yes.
you've been listening to
I
lately?"
interpreted it as new because he mentioned that it's been a long time. But yeah, that's fair. Right. So yeah, listen to a lot of Disney music. I listen to a lot. I have a Spotify playlist with like 130 songs that is exclusively comprised of the music I loved from like 1995 through 2012, which is a bunch of, pop punk, punk rock, alt rock, a bunch of that stuff. Some Foo Fighters, Blink-182, Coheed and Cambria, Muse, Motion City Soundtrack, like all the goodies that I put on, like if I'm driving, in the shower, things like that, just to amp me up. But the thing I listen to the most, speaking of cyberpunk, is some synthwave jams, baby. I love the like 80s style future music. It has a bunch of different names: vaporwave, synthwave, dark synth, like a lot of different kind of stuff. That I listen to it all day long while I'm working because it's got a bunch of drive to it and beat to it, which as a drummer I love, and it also helps me focus. The stuff I listen to doesn't have lyrics, which I write a lot at work, so that's important to me. And that's my like jam out music. I'll occasionally put on a video game soundtrack. Like I've been listening to a lot of Cloud Punk soundtrack actually lately, which in fairness is a synthwave style music. But I listened to, it's the Spider-Man Miles Morales soundtrack the other day because it's fun. It's got more like hip hoppy beats to it, but stuff that doesn't have lyrics I really enjoy while I'm working.
Yeah. I can't listen to music in work because it distracts me instead of helps me focus. So I need silence when I work. So like I'll have videos and stuff up when I'm not focused on a task, but as soon as I need to like really buckle down and get stuff done, it's silence. And I work from home now, so I don't travel. So I don't listen to even podcasts much anymore. Yeah. It's all mostly video content since I'm at home. But when I do drive, which is not often, I have been listening to a lot of Blink-182's California album. Oh, sure. I know there's another one after that, but I haven't listened to that one yet. But I really like the California album. Listening to a lot of Steven Seagal's, which is a bluegrass cover band. They do a lot of classic rock songs.
Okay.
And their Thunderstruck is so fucking good. They have anvil hits and everything in there. Nice. It sounds fucking rad. So Steve apostrophe N apostrophe Seagulls. They're a terrific cover band. They're on Spotify. I listen to their stuff a lot. I still listen to a lot of Mumford & Sons because for some reason their early stuff, it's in my vocal range. So while I'm driving alone, I can sing along with it, and it's not like painful. So, well, not painful because nobody can hear it. I mean, not painful for my throat. So I can actually sing along with it, and so I enjoy that quite a bit. Yeah, I don't really listen to game soundtracks. I don't have a great answer for Adam's question here because I don't go anywhere anymore.
Well, but that's, it's the question, and it's a fair answer to the question because it's your experience. So there you go, Adam. There's the music, or realistically lack of music that both of us listen to. Because I listen to lots of podcasts too. That's typically what I put on versus music. But awesome. That's the podcast.
Woo!
Oh, man. The excuse of, we had to catch up on a whole year, didn't really play out, because this one is just as long as the last one. So, there you go. Maybe you're going to get insanely long
We're going to focus
podcasts.
down on just video games.
Yeah, that'll make it shorter.
To talk about TV shows and music.
No, it's all good. And look, some people like really long form podcasts. Some people like shorter form podcasts. I guess my reasoning is, if you enjoy listening to us talk about stuff, the fact that it's long, who cares?
Right.
You just listen to it over a longer period of time, you know?
Right. Totally.
There you go. Well, okay.
It's our gift to you.
Yeah. More hours and a sore throat for tomorrow, for sure, for me.
Seriously.
Cool. Well, as always, we will end the podcast with something that we don't hate. And today I'll say that I don't hate that I actually have the drive and the interest to play and watch new things, which has been a struggle over the last couple of years. We talked about last episode just COVID and being at home and just changing in lifestyle and all that stuff of like losing a lot of the momentum to try new things and relying on nostalgia. And especially this last month, and I think in a large part it's due to doing this podcast, I'm excited to just put in a game and just check it out just for an hour. We'll see if I like it or not. Which actually I remembered another game that I played, which is Bugsnax, which we didn't talk about and we're not going to talk about. Maybe we'll talk about it next episode. But I played it for like an hour and a half. Haven't played more of it, but I'm glad I played it for an hour and a half because it was fun.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like you took Scorn's message to heart.
That's
You're
true.
You're too positive.
Absolutely.
Life is meaningless, hopeless.
I got rid of the COVID bat on my back, and he can't come back to me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, today I don't hate my handsome ass dog.
Thanks,
Man, I love
thanks,
that
bro.
Little bastard.
You're my dog, and I'm your handsome ass dog. That's what you mean,
D-O-G,
right?
not D-A-W-G.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's fair. He's a good-looking fella.
Man, he's handsome. Holy cow.
You done good. You made a good one.
Yeah, I made a good one. I rescued a good one from some podunk trailer home with like where they weren't bathing the puppies and the kids were running around barefoot and picking the puppies up by their legs and throwing them around.
Well, that part's not good. The barefoot kids, like, who cares? But yeah, animal cruelty. That's when we got a problem.
Yeah, and the kid was also like, "We stole these dogs," and I was like, "I don't know if I believe you, but here's $250. I'm gonna leave and pretend like I never heard that."
Great. Well, good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Glad he's got a good
mine now.
Yeah. Well, all right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. As a reminder, you can find our podcast wherever you did find the podcast, in addition to anywhere else you might want to find the podcast, like Samsung Podcasts. Holy shit. I told you this, Kyle, but I forgot to make a note because I wanted to mention it. On the last episode, we got one download from Samsung Podcasts.
Crazy son of a bitch.
I swear to God, I would not make this up. It's too perfect to make up. We got one single download from Samsung Podcasts. Hopefully,
if you're listening,
here's where we'll
write
know.
us an email.
Here's where we'll know. Let's see if we get another download on this episode. Because if we don't, then they were offended by us throwing shade at Samsung Podcasts.
Yeah. They're ride or die Samsung.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be at that point, right?
Right.
Oh, man. It was when I pulled up the analytics and I died laughing seeing one download on Samsung Podcasts.
That's tremendous.
You can also find the podcast on my website, SheaHatesEverything.com. I post it there in case you want to get easier access to time codes, things like that. And be sure, wherever you're listening to this, give us a subscribe or a follow or whatever your podcast service offers. Give us a rating. Give us a review. Tell your friends. We're doing this for fun. Like I said, Kyle's not my employee because we're not making money on this. But if we get to a point where we could make money, that'd be pretty dope. And then I could fire his ass. So,
all right, look, everybody, you have to stop listening to the podcast so I can continue to be on it. It cannot gain traction. We need to turn this fucking car around.
Oh boy.
Put your seatbelts on, kids.
Someday. That's my only hope. Just to fire you. That's my ultimate life goal. Is one day to fire you.
That's fucked up.
It's the big brother privilege.
Damn.
Oh, man. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a great month. We will be back the first Monday of March. Peace out.